So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto become new god and saved Itachi from darkness. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Bleary eyes blinked open, unable to focus. Everything seemed hazy, like a great fog engulfing his vision. Blinking again, he attempted to sit up. The motion sending waves of pain through his body, causing him to clench his teeth in agony. Only by willpower alone was he able to keep from crying out. He was, however, unable to prevent the whimper from escaping. It was then, as his body cried, he realized what had happened. Sasuke. He'd battled his brother, thrown every trick at him. That fool, Orochimaru, thought to take over Sasuke, but in one last act of love, Itachi sealed him away for good, removing the curse seal and with it, any power the snake had. Doing so wiped his body of every ounce of chakra. His pathways were destroying. He wouldn't survive it. It was just as Itachi Uchiha wished. But why was he here? Why was he alive? He'd felt the emptiness that came from true chakra depletion. He should be dead. Welcome back to the living, Itachi-san. Blinking several times in a futile attempt to clear his vision, he attempted to keep his face neutral. Kisame, you've been unconscious for almost a week. I've been treating your wounds as best I could. Why? Well, you were as good as dead. Toby, or rather Madara, didn't bother to check your pulse before he spirited your brother away. Honestly, if it was me fighting you, there would be no doubt of your death. Kisame grinned, bringing a bowl of broth to his lips. Swallowing down the thin fish broth, Itachi collapsed on the rough pallet. His body was so weak, he could barely move. The thought of Kisame caring for him turned his stomach. Not that it was Kisame, but just the thought of appearing so weak distressed him. Why are you here? Itachi grimaced at the light from the fire. His eyes were still recovering from the overuse of the Sharingan. At least, he hoped they were recovering. Hold your horses, I'm getting to it. Well, I don't like when there are hidden agendas, and there are a lot of them in the Akatsuki. So I figured I could stay with you. Kills me to miss out on the fighting, though. Kisame had the good grace to look contrite. You didn't have to save me. Yeah, I did. I'll catch up on the fighting later. I may not trust most of the Akatsuki, but I trusted Pain-sama. That shit with Toby don't sit well in my craw. The outside is calm, but the depths are turbulent in Akatsuki now. Bad shit is about to happen. Kisame poked the fire with a stick, overturning the embers. Itachi closed his eyes. Things were not how they were supposed to be. Sasuke was supposed to be the savior of their clan. He was supposed to redeem them in the eyes of Konoha. Instead, his mind was warped from the torture it endured from both himself and the fiend Orochimaru. Now, he was in the hands of a man even more twisted than the snake-like Sannin. A single tear leaked from his closed lids. Sasuke, why do you allow yourself to be used by others? Can you not be your own man? Are you all right, Itachi-san? Worry evident in Kisame's voice. No, he whispered. The jostling of his body woke him from his fitful sleep. Kisame, what are you doing? I got us a horse and cart. We need to move. It's not safe to stay here. We need to find more permanent lodgings. Itachi snorted as he was lifted onto the cart. Yeah, I can see you will be riveting conversation. Leave me to rest, Kisame. Fine. The sun peeked over the horizon, spreading pinks and purples across the lightening sky. Itachi paid it no mind. His thoughts remained on his mistakes. Mistakes he would have to atone for. He'd hoped to make Sasuke his executioner. He wanted him to avenge their family, to renew the Uchiha clan. His failure only made his heart ache all the more. His soul burned with self-loathing, a constant bubbling of anguish. Death was the only way to ease his mind and soul. To take his own life was out of the question. Suicide would accomplish nothing. Sasuke would have to do it, but could he bear to stand before his brother once more? Taking inventory of his injuries, he was certain it would be months or longer before he would be able to take on his brother once more. With Sasuke as he is, there would be little point. His death would be meaningless, another Uchiha left to rot. Madara would not allow him far from him. Itachi W. As sure Madara had plans for his brother. His thoughts drifted back to his battle with Sasuke. Each blow he'd landed, each tortuous vision he showed, they all chipped away a little more at his soul. Sasuke wasn't right. To allow such a monster to remain on this earth went against every bit of his conscience. Itachi felt his heart freeze. He would take care of the monster he'd created before offering himself to the village in penance. Assumed death offered him a cover. First he would heal, then he would watch from the shadows as Madara once did. He would watch Sasuke. He would see what his little brother would do. The Jinchuriki's determination to redeem Sasuke burned into his memory. He would entrust Sasuke to him for now. Perhaps he could do what Itachi was not able to. It was unlikely. He had a dark suspicion that he would be called on to put down his brother. Those were thoughts best left for later when his mind was not clouded with pain. Allowing the sway of the cart to lull him, he drifted into oblivion. His body hurt but his mind was too exhausted from its turmoil to face what he knew needed to be faced. The dread coursing through him at the mental thought of killing Sasuke. Killing the little brother who doted on him. He'd become a monster for his brother and in turn created a monster. Dreams of the past, of happier days, were lost amidst the crushing guilt of what he'd done. He screamed at the sight of his beautiful mother lying dead in a pool of her own blood. She'd attempted to defend his fallen father and in turn was struck down. He screamed only in his mind as his blades sliced through them one by one. Uncles, aunts, cousins, they all fell before him, all but one. Sasuke. The absolute fear in his brother's eyes made him question his decision for a split second. To save the village from war, he struck a deal with the devil. It was ironic that now that devil was seeking to destroy the world, to rebuild it from the ashes in his image. A false peace loomed on the horizon. Yet Itachi could do no more than stand on the outside looking in. His dream shifted as all dreams do. Before him lay the world, villages a battleground of chaos, the exact thing he'd hoped to prevent. Walking through the horror, he found himself staring at his worst nightmare. On the ground before him lay his brother, his body broken almost beyond recognition. Tears of red streamed from his eyes as he looked into the gouged-out orifices of Sasuke's eye sockets and then at his own hands in which rest his brother's eyes. No, his eyes shot open, seeing only the fading sun in the distance. Evening, grinned his partner, sharpened teeth gleaming in the fading light. I slept the entire day. That you did. Your body is still very deprived of chakra. All I was able to get in while you were comatose was a little broth. Now that you're awake, you'll probably rebuild it much faster. Kisame lifted him as if he weighed no more than a sack of grain. A campfire crackled welcomingly in a small clearing. Kisame had been busy. Food was already prepared, 2 small hairs dripping grease into the flames. Itachi bit his lip as his weakened body was lowered onto a sleeping bag. Where are we? Border of forest country. Figured it would be the best place to lay low for a while. Why are you doing this, really? It's been a long time since I met someone who treated me like more than hired muscle. I may not be as smart as you, Itachi-san, but you never lorded over me. I respect that. I made a decision as Madara took Sasuke away. I said to myself, are you going to leave your friend lying there? I don't need the Akatsuki to find a good fight. I figured once you are healed up, we can become mercenary shinobi. Plenty of fighting and good money if you're good, which we sure as fuck are. Kisame as he offered bites of hair to him. His body screamed in hunger but he couldn't eat more than a few bites before his eyes were drooping once more. Being so badly injured, it was a wonder he'd survived long enough to wake up. I'm tired. I'm going to head to the nearby town tomorrow. Some of your wounds don't look so good. You need a proper healing. Kisame said, finishing off both hairs before burying the bones. Are we that close to a town? About 6 hours walking, 3 hours full speed. I'm going to start working on a shelter after we get you looked at. Hey, look at that. We'll be like a married couple, I'll be the husband and you will be the wife. Kisame released a guttural laugh, clutching his sides in mirth. If you even think about me being your wife, I'll kill you. Ah, Itachi-san, I was only joking. You don't have big enough titties for me. I don't have titties. I know. You would make one pretty wife if you had some big jugs, nice and soft to bury my face in. You are vulgar. Ain't that the truth? Well, we should get some shut-eye. Kisame reclined against a log, snoring almost immediately. His apparent relaxation might fool the casual viewer. Itachi knew Kisame would be awake at the slight snapping of a twig. He was a very good shinobi. Itachi attempted to move, despite the softness of the bag, every time he tried to get comfort. Some other part of him would begin aching. He couldn't even stand. His chakra deprivation was the worst he'd ever experienced. He wasn't sure when or how he fell asleep, but the shuffling of Kisame woke him. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to head out to that town. I know it's not much, but here are a few shuriken and kunai. I'll be back with the healer and extra provisions as soon as possible," Kisame said before climbing in the cart. Itachi scowled at the weapons. He would be lucky to even be able to pick up the lightweight pieces of metal, let alone throw them. His Sharingan and Genjutsu were out the question. He barely had enough chakra to breathe. For about an hour after Kisame left, Itachi tried lifting a kunai. His fingers had no strength. Even if he had the strength in his arms to lift them, his fingers refused to wrap around them. Growling in frustration, he stared out into the trees. Squirrels chased each other, flicking their tails as they went. Kisame had chosen a peaceful place, surprising. Knowing the tendencies of the other. Flopping back to the pallet, he felt exhaustion beating at him. A migraine started behind his eyes, forcing him to close them against the light trickling through the trees. In the end, he could fight the pull of sleep no more. He drifted through a black nothing. The darkness began to lighten. His eyes squinted to see through the haze. With a sudden burst of light, buildings emerged. He found himself staring at himself, only younger, much younger. "Ni-san, you promised to always stay with me. Stop being a baby, Otudo. This world isn't made for crybabies. But, I'll be alone if you aren't with me. You have mother and father. I don't think father likes me much. I'm not as good as you, Ni-san. I can't promise that I can be with you all the time. But I do promise that I will always look after you." Itachi smiled, flicking his brother's brow. "I'm so sorry for failing you, Sasuke," whispered Itachi as he stared on the long-forgotten moment. "Please forgive me." Quote, "I'm going to kill you," screamed a 13-year-old Sasuke, charging his brother. "Not strong enough, Sasuke. Perhaps you need another lesson on how weak you really are." The word faded to black and crimson. Itachi watched the scenes play out, his heart aching for his brother. Tears tracked down his face as he watched despair play across his brother's face. Sasuke. Itachi. The dream world faded, showing the heavy light of midday. Kisame looked concerned as he lifted the smaller man into a sitting position. "Are you all right, Itachi-san? You keep asking that, Kisame. You never answer me. I brought a healer. She'll take care of you while I start unloading the supplies. You would not believe how cheap lumber is here," chuckled Kisame. "We are in forest country after all. Spoil sport. My name is Keiko. How are you feeling?" Her voice quivered as she spoke. "Fine. You don't look fine. If I don't look fine, then why did you ask how I felt?" "To see what you would say. She smiled shyly before approaching him. Her hands were calloused as she ran then over his body, checking for broken bones. Satisfied, she nodded before pulling his shirt over his head. Her eyes widened. His body was covered with cuts, some mostly healed, others festered and bleeding. "Oh, this is bad. I gathered that." She left him, returning several minutes later with Kisame in a kettle. The healer set about heating the water on the fire while Kisame stripped him naked. He hissed as bandages were removed, the dried pus pulling away to reveal reddened skin. "I'm going to need to clean everything out. I brought some herbs that should help." "Why can't I move?" Itachi asked, knowing the answer but still wanting to hear it from her lips. "Kisame-san informed me of your chakra depletion. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say you blew out your chakra pathways. It's just going to take time and physical therapy to get back to your previous strength. Don't push yourself. It will only delay your healing." Her hands were gentle as they cleaned the wounds of infection, coating each injury with a paste of herbs. The scent, while not bad, caused his nose to twitch. "You are an amazing man, Itachi-san. Most men would scream like babies after so many wounds being cleaned." She smiled at him. "Don't waste your breath on that one, Keiko-chan. He's as cold as ice." Kisame chuckled as he helped Itachi into fresh clothes. I mean," she whispered. No worries, he might not appreciate you, but I wouldn't mind sharing your company. He grinned. Much like the shark he was. Don't make me sick. You're already sick, Itachi-san. Kisame. Fine, fine, you're no fun. Kisame stood, lifting the healer into his arms. I'll carry you back. It will be much faster than taking the cart. Wait. She cried as Kisame took off through the trees, his large body surprisingly limber. Idiot. Itachi found himself dozing off again. The sun having nearly set when Kisame plopped down on the dirt next to him. I think I've found my soul mate. Nope, but it sure was a nice bonus. You know Itachi-san, it might be nice here. You could settle down, find a nice plump woman and have little Itachis running around in no time. No, thank you, I still have things to do. Kisame rolled his eyes. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you had a hard-on for your brother. Don't start, Kisame. Honestly, what are you going to do when you find him again? If you want to die so bad, I'll kill you now and save you the trouble of looking for him. Kisame growled menacingly. We each have our torches to bear, Kisame. I have to atone for what I did. You were ordered to buy that fucking village you still call home. That does not make it right. The remainder of the evening was spent in silence, Kisame cooking some fresh-caught trout. It was good, but Itachi was unable to handle more than a few bites before falling asleep once more. With his wounds properly dressed, his body began healing. For the most part, he slept the next few days while Kisame built a house. The rhythmic hammering lulled him into a state of contentment, well, as much of contentment as he could feel. He could feel the itching of his wounds, a testament to their healing. Even the finer movements of his fingers and toes came slowly. He was grateful. It was very disconcerting to have to rely on Kisame to eat. It's finished, Itachi-san, shouted Kisame as he came trotting towards the camp. Is it? Indeed. 4 rooms. Gonna have to make an outhouse though. No plumbing out this way. Kisame grinned as he lifted Itachi, carrying him towards the newly built home. Look, I'm going to carry you like a bride across the threshold. Idiot. Kisame chuckled, stopping so Itachi could have a look. While a bit rustic, the house was well made. It would withstand the elements. Since when are you skilled in carpentry? I'll keep that my little secret. Now that the house is finished, I can start courting Keiko-chan. Are you seriously going to try and marry her? You are a shinobi, one who loves battle, I might add. Not to mention a missing nin. What kind of life do you think you can provide for her? Just knowing you puts her in danger from Anbu. Itachi attempted to keep his voice calm, but the state of his body and his mind negated the results. Itachi didn't want to see his friend destroyed when he came home to find his wife and any possible children dead or in containment. He'd seen what women in Anbu containment went through. Rape, torture, death, all because it was too dangerous to release them, or because they just had too much fun breaking them. It had made Itachi sick to see such depravity in his village. He almost wished he'd allowed Madara the chance to destroy the village. But no, despite all that, he loved what the village stood for. His clan was wrong to consider a coup. They should have tried to fix things, not take them over. Would've, could've, should've. That was all he could say. Even if given the choice, he wasn't so sure his father or the clan as a whole would have done anything different. Arrogance was a trait not only belonging to the Hyuga clan. Maybe so, but I would like a chance at happiness. I won't lie to her. She'll know the risks before I take her as a wife. Kisame said quietly. Bowing his head, he clenched his hand. If Kisami's mind was set, there was nothing he could do to change it. Each had their own path to walk. If this was the one he chose, then so be it. I would support him as best he could, as Kisame had always supported him. As you wish, Kisame. You know, you could do the same. A wife might do you good. I'm serious. I would not foist myself on any woman. There are parts of me that no one should see. You delude yourself. Perhaps, but it is my right. So it is. Let's just halt this conversation for a while. My body couldn't handle a woman like it as anyway. At least not one as busty as your Keiko-chan. Kisame barked a laugh, setting Itachi before the fire once more. As night set, both men settled in their sleeping bags. Itachi stared out into the darkness. The sounds of night creatures loud in his ears, while the memories of his shame flashed before his mind's eye. The Sharingan would never allow him to forget what he had done. In that he was grateful. He never wanted to forget. Forgiveness would never be his. The most he could hope for would be the silence of death. Closing his eyes, he drifted off into a blessedly dreamless sleep. Morning would come soon enough, and with it the memories. Itachi took a few calming breaths. In the past 6 months, he'd made progress but was still little more than an invalid. He LD walk but only with the aid of a crutch. He'd only recently developed fine movements in his fingers. In other words, he could walk and use chopsticks. He was not pleased. To him, it felt as if his body was taunting him. He'd been called a genius all of his childhood. Now he could barely do the most menial of tasks. Even his Sharingan was nearly useless. He could only activate it for 2 or 3 minutes before being required to rest his eyes. Keiko assured him his chakra pathways were healing nicely. Her words of comfort did little for his impatience. A simple walk around the yard exhausted him. Already his legs were shaking. After his body healed itself, it would take months or possibly years to reach his former strength. That thought did not make him happy. He wanted to complete his duty as quickly as possible. As much as he mentally griped and complained, he kept his exterior collected. He did it more for Kiko's sake than Kisami's. Barely 2 months after they arrived, Kisame and Keiko were married. Kisami's seed must be especially potent. The poor woman was pregnant almost immediately. Itachi-san, why do you push yourself? Keiko walked to where Itachi stood panting against one of the trees lining the small clearing. I don't have time to allow nature to take its course, he answered politely. The manners ingrained in him from a young age refused to allow him to snap at the woman because of his own frustrations. You may be impeding your healing. I know my limits, small though they are. Do you really? If you knew your limits you wouldn't be in this shape. True, if I knew my true limits, I would be dead. Itachi-san, don't pity me, Keiko-chan. I won't be so foolish this time around. I don't know your story. Kisame tells me it is not his place to tell, but I'm here if you need to talk. Itachi stared at the honest face. Keiko reminded him a lot of his mother. She possessed a nurturing personality and would make a wonderful mother. As welcoming as she was, his demons were his own to battle. He would leave her out of it. She was in enough danger just being married to Kisame. He winced as she began to massage the quivering muscles in his legs. Her hands were strong due to years working as a healer. The breath hissed through his teeth as she worked deep into the tissue, promoting blood and chakra flow. If I wasn't so trusting of you, Itachi-san, I would say you were trying to take my woman from me, chucked Kisame as he tossed his plain black cloak on the rack near the door before shedding his sandals. Itachi grunted. Kisame walked to where Keiko was, his large hands playing with the nearly invisible bump on her abdomen. Itachi focused his eyes away from the touching scene. It brought back too many memories best left buried in the shattered parts of his mind. How are you feeling, Itachi-san? Kisami's gruff voice brought him back to the present, a fact he was very grateful for. Not as well as I would like. I have news from Konoha. Itachi's eyes narrowed, his quick mind jumping at the baiting tone. Kisame had taken up small mercenary jobs. It fed his need for battle while keeping a steady influx of money. His most recent job required him to escort a merchant to a town located in Fire Country. It was dangerous for the simple fact of Fire Country being heavily on guard, as Konohagakure was the home of the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. One of the 2 remaining vessels required by Madara to activate the idol. What have you heard? Danzo has been made Hokage. Itachi's face remained calm despite the instant flaring of Sharingan, Tomo's spinning wildly. Kisame winced. He'd been on the receiving end of that look only once. He almost wished he'd kept Itachi in the dark. Knowing how angry the other would be when he found out was the only thing giving him the courage to tell him now. What else? The Cages are holding a summit to discuss Sasuke's fate, among other issues. Your brother has become quite notorious. Me took a swallow of the sake placed before him by Keiko. When? Now, or at least that's what I was told. Danzo is a dangerous man to have such power. Sasuke will be there, as will Madara. Grabbing his sake cup, He hurled it across the room in a show of emotion rarely displayed. God damn it, Itachi-san. Keiko started to approach him only to be stopped by Kisame. Itachi-san, I owe you many things. Say the word and I'll take up Samahata against the cages. He was tempted. Heaven help him. He was tempted to take Kisame up on the offer. It was a suicide mission. Kisame would go down as he always dreamed, in heat of battle. His crimson eyes caught the clenching of small hands. Keiko would not try to stop him. She understood what they both were. She understood but would never accept. Itachi closed his eyes. He would not leave the pregnant woman to fend for herself. He would not add that sin to the many already weighing down his soul. What little remained of his humanity wouldn't allow it. No, but I want to know the outcome. I'll leave this in other hands for now, he said, standing. Keiko moved to assist him, only to be brushed off as he limped slowly out the door. Ted to walk after him only to be stopped once more by Kisame. Leave him be. Itachi-san carries a lot of demons. All the more reason to help him. If he wants help, he will ask for it. Some friend you are. Keiko, listen to me. I'll only say this once. The things that man has suffered and still remains sane is a greater accomplishment than any other shinobi. He was an Anbu captain at age 13. When most children are barely a genin, he was assassinating men. The only thing keeping him sane was his love for his little brother. He has had more suffering in his 21 years than most have in a lifetime. He has kept me from doing stupid things countless times. The happiness I have with you, I owe to him. Kisame stroked her hand, his other palming their growing child. Is there anything we can do for him? Help his body heal so he can slay his demons. What if we send him off to die? Uchiha Itachi won't die unless he wants to. Now, go fix me some food, woman. I'm hungry. Keep a tone like that and you'll be having nothing but cold cereal. Itachi smiled at the shouts coming from the house. It wouldn't be long before they ended up in the bedroom. Hopefully he would be closer to the more heavily wooded area by then. He had no desire to listen to the two of them couple like rabbits. His eyes shifted between crystal clarity and blurred haze, a side effect of overuse of the Sharingan. He was surprised he'd held it for as long as he had. An overturned tree trunk seemed highly appropriate to rest on while the inside of the house was a dangerous place. The sun was nearly setting when Kisame plopped down on the ground beside him. The larger man was freshly bathed, his hair slightly limp from the weight of the water. His lips were pulled back in a grin, telling Ida Kai all he needed to know about what had gone on inside after he'd left. I'll leave tomorrow. You know, you could at least show a little gratitude. There are going to be a lot of guards at this summit. All the cages will be there. Quote, I'm sure you can handle yourself. PFF, when am I not able to handle myself? Kisame, yeah, reconnaissance only. Don't join the battle should one erupt. I don't want your child to be fatherless. Kisame grunted in acknowledgement, pulling Itachi to his feet. Itachi was grateful for Kisame's company. Out of all the members of the Akatsuki, he and Kisame got along the best. Aside from Pain and Konan, the others merely tolerated each other. He was happy to have a friend such as the older man. He hoped he wasn't making a mistake by asking Kisame to do this for him. The days turned into weeks. Keiko had blown up like a balloon at 6 months into her pregnancy. Each day she would sit waiting for Kisame to walk through the door. Never before had she worried so much for him. Itachi could see the worry. Mentally, he mirrored it. Physically, he showed nothing out of the ordinary. The summit shouldn't have lasted more than a few days. That Kisame as taking longer than normal worried him. Over the last few weeks, Itachi had begun attempting simply jutsu. His frustration at his inability to perform to his own personal standards made him less than pleasant company. Keiko had taken to avoiding him other than to assist him medically. Not that he blamed her. Unlike Kisame, who was vocal about his displeasure, Itachi began to turn into himself. He hardly spoke at all, answering questions in single-word responses. The only light in his darkened tunnel was the feeling of his chakra returning. With his pathways healing, his chakra was able to be stored. Instead of leaking naturally from his body. It was slow, but the excess of chakra assured him of his recovery. With the presence of chakra, he began experimenting with jutsus. Attempting such A task was a facilitator of his frustration. It was like being a pre-genin again. His body refused to mold the chakra as he wanted. The result was burned lips and fingers from attempting Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. With all to show for his efforts was a tiny ball of flame. He couldn't recall the number of times he'd used the family technique. He should be able to perform it. The most he could manage was a small flaming ball the size of an orange. The high amount of chakra needed for the jutsu to be effective was beyond him at this point in his recovery. Fuck. He hissed, slumping exhausted to the ground. He didn't even have enough chakra left to stand, let alone attempt the jutsu again. Groaning, his fingers dug grooves in the ground. Never in his life had he felt such helpless frustration. He'd always been powerful. His eyes closed as he reflected on himself. He might pretend he didn't care about the survival of Kisame, it would be a lie. Uchiha Itachi, prodigy of the Uchiha family, was worried about his friend Kisame. Nor sooner had the word left his mouth did his clever eyes spot the approach of a slumped frame. Somewhere, somehow, he found the strength stand. Hobbling to the other, he stopped a few feet from him. Kisame didn't look good at all. His blue-tinted skin looked more gray than blue, as well as his trademark sword, Samahata, was missing. Kisame, what happened? Itachi cursed his weakened body. He was unable to help the other in his obvious exhaustion. Somehow, the two, both exhausted, made it to the steps leading into the house. Keiko met them, crying out at the weakened state of her husband. Kisame collapsed at this point, his body going limp. How the 6-month pregnant woman and the nearly crippled Uchiha managed to get him in bed, neither one knew. Instead, they kept bedside vigil, worried as the large man continued to sleep. After 3 days, Itachi jerked awake to find pale eyes staring at him. "You're awake." "That I am," chuckled Kisame. "What the hell happened? I told you not to fight." "Well, that's the thing. The summit broke. Sasuke, stupid little bastard, attempted to kill Danzo. He attacked both the cage as well as the Raikage. I don't know what bullshit Madara has been feeding him, but there's very little humanity left in him. You and I, we aren't innocent little lambs, but fuck, he makes the two of us seem like saints. He's going to be put down like a mad dog." Kisame struggled to a sitting position. "He's not dead." "Well, he wasn't. Madara spirited him away. I was on my way back when I ran into Killer Bee. Fucking 8 tails. He recognized me as Akatsuki and attacked. Then, my fucking sword turned on me. Just like a woman, fickle little bitch. I'm glad I made it here before collapsing. I didn't want the Raikage and his pet Jinchuriki to get another chance at me. Fuckers nearly took my head off." Kisame grumbled. Itachi knew Samahata's desertion hurt Kisame more than he let on. After so many years of companionship, one would think the sentient sword would have developed more of a relationship with Kisame. "I'm sorry I sent you there, Kisame." "What's this? Uchiha Itachi apologizing. The man who apologizes to no one apologizing to little ol' me. Is the world ending?" Kisame gasped, bringing a hand to his chest. "Don't get used to it. It won't happen again." Itachi fought the blush threatening to spread across his cheeks. "Itachi-san, make your peace with your brother's memory. He will be dead before you are healed enough to go after him." The smile faded from Kisame's face. "I know." Kisame nodded, remaining silent as he watched a mask once again take control of Itachi's face. He hated it. He hated the events that had turned such a beautiful man into a nearly emotionless robot. Itachi stood slowly with the aid of his crutch. His thoughts were on the brother he'd sought to protect. It tore at his heart to be the last of his family. Sasuke would be dead in days if he had the 5 nations on his heels. Once away from the house, he released a scream. His eyes melted to red. His pain was recorded in his memory. He'd known Sasuke would need to die, but he'd hoped to do the unhappy deed himself. As small penance for what he made him into. His fists plowed into the nearest tree. Chakra poured through his pathways, enhancing his strength. His fists pummeled the tree until his knuckles bled crimson to match his eyes. It wasn't supposed to be like this. What was his purpose now? Since the day Sasuke was born, he'd lived for his brother. His love bordered on unnatural. Now, his brother was marked for death. His own mind screamed with agony as his fists continued to pound the tree. Skin hung in ribbons around his knuckles, yet still, he continued to pound at the tree. Pain was relative. The physical pain did little to distract from the emotional agony. He knew the moment his eyes faded to their natural black. He was nearly at his limit of chakra. Why did things have to turn out like this? Tears burned his eyes as he slumped to the ground, exhausted of all energy. He refused to cry. He had refused to cry while watching the blood drain from his parents. He had refused to cry as he left his brother's quaking frame lying on the ground after torturing him with images of the slaughter. Now, faced with the death of his beloved Sasuke, he found himself wanting to do so. He wanted to cry, to release the pent-up emotion. The drops refused to fall. He'd promised himself he would do right by his brother, to stop the monster he'd created. Now, even that was being taken from him. What reason was there for him to live? Become like his brother, seeking vengeance for what was forced on him? No, he would stay here, heal. Then he would make his decision. Itachi-san, shouldn't you be in bed, Kisame? The same could be said for you. You look dead on your feet. It will be all right, Itachi-san. Itachi didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind whirled with his memories. He allowed Kisame to pull him weakly to his feet. Both men wearily made their way towards where a concerned Keiko waited. Itachi-san, your hands. He'll be fine. It'll be sore as all fuck tomorrow but he'll live. Itachi-san has been through far worse. For the next few days, Itachi remained in his room. He refused both food and company. Kisame let him be, keeping Keiko away as well. It spurred the mother of all fights between the couple. Her mothering instincts were beginning to kick in while Kisame understood Itachi's need to emotionally come to terms with the fact his brother was most likely dead. You bastard! You would leave him to waste away in there! She screamed, throwing a pan at Kisami's head. Only his shinobi reflexes kept him from being knocked unconscious as she continued to scream her wrath. Woman, if you weren't heavy with my child I would beat you black and blue. Kisame snarled. I'd like to see you try, you big fish. Keiko, enough. Both turned to see Itachi step from his room. His skin seemed almost translucent. He leaned heavily on his crutch before sitting at the table. Do not fight over me. I won't just wither away. That would a bit anticlimactic. Itachi-san, Kisame, I want you to help me train. I need to start rebuilding my muscles. Yeah, I'll help. Itachi-san, are you sure you should start doing that so soon? I mean, it's been barely 6 months. Thank you, Keiko, but I'm a shinobi. I can't sit around. I need something to work for. Just don't overdo it, or you might permanently destroy your pathways. Itachi nodded in understanding. He'd done a lot of thinking while in his self-imposed prison. He thought of his past, and of his future. He would stay with Kisame and Keiko until he was sure they were safe from most of the hunter shinobi. He would make that decision when the time came. For now, he would get stronger. He found it humorous to say such words. Once considered one of the most deadly missing nin in the world, as he was now. Even the most idiotic genin could take him down. Training would be hard. He would need to build his physical strength before he could hope to regain any of his previous skills. Genius only took you so far. He wondered what Sasuke would say if he knew his brother was no more a genius than any other student. The reason Itachi was so strong so young was because he would train until his body grew numb. He was forced into such a position by the clan, by his father. I've been doing some calculations. I think it will take me at least a year to get physically where I was before, taking into account the rate at which I'm healing. Itachi began. At least another year after that, reacquainting my body with my various jutsu. So 2 years and you will back at your maximum. Yes, I'm so going to bust your ass for all those times you whipped me training. Kisami's eyes took on a dark gleam. The next few weeks were slow going, Itachi nearly running himself into the ground. He stayed away from jutsus, simply working his body. Kisame helped. Mainly his job was to assist him until his legs were strong enough for him to move about without a crutch. Keiko supplied them both with high-caloric food. Itachi would need the high intake if he was to keep up this brutal physical routine. At 8 months, Keiko was barely able to move through the house without assistance. Kisame doted on her. Itachi did what he could to help, taking over the cooking. Keiko nearly fell out of her chair when Itachi presented a meal of tender venison, garden peas, and corn cakes. God, Itachi-san, I'd forgotten how good it was to eat your cooking. I knew I should have married you. Kisame moaned as he ate another plateful of the seasoned meat. Keiko slapped him in response. Itachi grunted, ignoring Tatu. Itachi-san, I have a favor to ask. I took an easy escort job, to get us some extra money before the baby comes. What's the catch, Kisame? I'll be gone at least 3 weeks. Kisame, I know I'll be cutting it close. But I think I can be back before the birth. We still have another month and I leave tomorrow. Come on, Itachi-san. Just make sure she eats and doesn't get stuck in any doors. That earned him another slap. Fine. Quote. A sharp-toothed grin spread across Kisami's face. Thank you, Itachi-san. Kisame returned home 2 weeks later to a dark glare. He froze in his steps. Something had happened. Itachi rarely looked this angry. He watched as the other slowly rose to his feet. A kunai found itself buried in the door, inches from his face. Itachi-san, go see your wife and that little demon spawn she birthed. Itachi's door slammed with a bang. The rustling of the wind through the trees always calmed him. It was as if his mother was crooning a nursery rhyme in his ear. It had always given him comfort, even during his time with the Akatsuki. The weight of his sins seemed just a little less during these quiet times alone. He wanted to stay like this forever, cradled on the limb of a great tree. Only the wind to keep him company. Unkatachi, Mama said it's time to eat. Itachi glanced below him, his moment of peace lost just as quickly as it came. The boy below grinned widely, his jagged teeth gleaming white in the fading sunlight. A small part of him softened. He looked like his mother, except for his teeth. He definitely had his father's smile. Izumi, weren't you going fishing with your father? Quote. The 5-year-old boy wrinkled his nose. I done wanna fish. I wanna be a shinobi like you and daddy. This life asks too much from our children. Enjoy your childhood while you can. It can all be taken away at a moment's glance. Itachi allowed one of his rare smiles to grace his face. What's for dinner? Fish. I thought you didn't go fishing. We went. I just played while daddy fished. Quote. I see. Itachi placed his hand on the boy's dark hair. He felt the soft strands sift through his fingers. They reminded him of Sasuke, of the days long past, when he was God in the eyes of his brother. Izumi grinned up at him. Carry me. Itachi crouched beside the boy, gesturing for him to climb onto his back. Warm arms wrapped around his neck as he stood, securing the boy's legs with his forearms. A flash of memory rushed through him as he felt the warmth covering his back. It had hurt so much the first time he'd barely made it to the house before dumping the boy on Kisame and disappearing into the forest for nearly a week. Each time still hurt, almost unbearably, but they were manageable. He locked away his emotions, much as he did after that night. Only Izumi ever received one of his smiles. The day Kisame asked him to be the boy's godfather was truthfully one of his happiest. The last 5 years had been healing in more ways than one. It had taken him almost 18 months to regain his former strength. After that, he'd joined Kisame in his mercenary work. As a precaution, he wore a mask, similar to Hitaki Kakashi. It took some getting used to, but no more than wearing his Anbu mask for the first time. He was a highly trained shinobi, a little discomfort was nothing new. It never fails. Izumi can find you anywhere. Kisame grinned, his hands moving deftly as they stroked a kunai over the sharpening stone. Only because I let him. Go inside, Izumi. I want to talk to your uncle. Itachi settled beside Kisame, his eyes staring blankly forward. He listened to the scraping of metal against stone, occasionally the sound of water being spread over the stone to keep it from overheating. It was a familiar sound. D for one born and bred to be a killing machine. Itachi-san, I received an offer for a job. It will bring in a substantial pay. If we take it, the caravan leaves within a week. Kisame began as he id the razor-sharp kunai into the pouch beside his chair. Itachi inclined his head, waiting for his partner to continue. There was a catch. He could smell it in Kisami's stalling. He sighed, a barely audible sound. What's the catch? Well, we would be escorting the caravan to Konohagakure. Kisame lifted another kunai, testing the tip with a finger. How much? A lot. Triple R normal earnings. Are you sure they aren't working for Anbu? That seems a little odd to offer such a high price to already expensive mercenaries. Yeah, I thought of that. The shipment is royalty. The Mountain Sioux, NTRY daimyo's youngest daughter and grandchild were traveling through the area. It seems the girl married into Konoha royalty or something, probably a Hyuga. She's on her way home. Kisame yawned. Itachi stretched his legs before him. Why do they suddenly need guards? Her caravan was attacked just outside the villages they were passing through. The head guard determined they needed additional protection for the remainder of the trip. He asked around and our names came up. Of course, it wasn't their real names. They worked under the assumed names of Shisui Obito and Hoshi Izu. You do realize how dangerous it will be. For me especially. That's why I want us both to go. I know if the shit hits the fan, if the two of us are together we can escape anything. I know it's asking a lot of you, Itachi-san. Itachi remained silent, his pitch-black eyes stared out into the growing darkness. Though he'd been physically fine for 2 years, he'd stayed with Kisame. Perhaps it was stalling. They received little to no news concerning the larger villages and they didn't seek it out. It was bad enough to be missing nins, Kisame had a family to protect. That meant not drawing attention to themselves. You'll need to wear a mask for this. Ah, come on Itachi-san. I mean it. There is a reason we stay clear of the larger villages. This time we will have to walk right through those gates. So we're going. Are you sure you are ready to face your past? No, but I have to do it sometime. Shall we go tell Keiko and the squirt? Itachi followed his long-time friend into the warm house. The evening chill was melted away from the heat of the stove in the simple but cozy kitchen. Keiko smiled as Kisame scooped her up into his arms. Even now, the small protrusion of her abdomen spoke of another Hoshigaki child on the way. He was surprised. After her miscarriage at 6 months the previous year, he was surprised she didn't take precautions to avoid another. Both had been crushed by the loss. They had even named the baby Kaimu. It meant ocean dream. Itachi built the small funeral pyre himself while Kisame mourned with Keiko. The days that followed were some of the saddest for everyone. Even Itachi said a small prayer for the little soul. Only Izumi was the glue holding both his parents together. His bright smile helped ease all their hearts, including Itachi's. Hoshigaki Kisame, put me down this instant if you want to eat. Keiko laughed, attempting to sound stern. Izumi giggled at the sight of his father lifting his mother in the air. He knew something was up if he as buttering up his mother with attention. His lip poked out a little as he tried to figure out what it was Daddy was hiding. Itachi-san, tell this beast to put me down. I prefer not to interfere in issues not of my concern. Itachi settled in his seat, sending Izumi a little wink. Izumi giggled, sitting and watching the actions of his parents with much mirth. Kisame finally settled Keiko in her seat before taking his own. The blush on her cheeks told everyone she didn't mind the attention at all. Let's eat. Kisame grinned before grabbing his chopsticks and digging into the food before him. The sound of eating encompassed the room. The simple meal of seasoned fish, rice, and miso soup was devoured with gusto. I'll be happy when you start cooking again, Itachi-san. Keiko smiled, earning a snicker from Kisame. Unka Tachi is the bestest cook in the world. Izumi chimed in, his mouth full of rice. Don't speak with your mouth full. Itachi said calmly, taking a sip from his soup bowl. If you had been raised by Uchiha Makoto you would not have been allowed to go on missions if you could not take care of yourself. Keiko lowered her eyes. She knew how much it hurt Itachi to speak of his family. That he willingly offered information or insight into them was both a joyful and sad occasion. She must have been a wonderful woman. Kisame. Itachi placed his chopsticks beside his empty bowls. Kisame nodded, turning to his wife. Keiko, Itachi-san and I are leaving in a few days for a job. We will be gone for several weeks. I want you and Izumi to go stay with your parents while we are gone. Why? We are escorting some people to Konoha. It will take at least a month to get there, traveling with a carriage. We are likely going to have to stop several times for the passengers. I want to make sure the two of you are safe. We will be fine here. Don't argue with me, woman. I need to know you are safe. You and Izumi mean too much to me. With both Itachi-san and myself gone, We need you protected. Do this, for me. Keiko opened her mouth to dispute the request before closing it with a snap. All right. Kisame relaxed almost immediately. Keiko leaned into him. Izumi climbed into his father's lap, cuddling close. Itachi stood, quietly exiting. It was always so strange to see such a violent man be humbled by his wife and son. The sight also brought back memories of cuddling on his mother's lap, and they hurt more than he would ever let on. Closing his eyes, he breathed in deeply before increasing the chakra in his legs and darting through the trees to the all training ground he and Kisame had built about half a mile from the house. He raced up a pole, balancing himself on the flat top. His hands dipped quickly into the pouches at his side. 8 kunai, 4 in each hand, were removed and thrown at various targets. Anything less than perfection was not allowed. It was how he'd always been, how his father had made him. When he landed gracefully beside a mannequin, he began to throw punches and kicks. Each smooth movement pounded away at the scarred wood. Itachi might prefer to keep himself back, using ninjutsu and genjutsu, but that was no excuse to not be able to defend oneself physically if need be. The sound of a twig breaking drew his attention to the tree line. Itachi-san. Kisame grinned, drawing a massive sword from his back. Very well. Itachi smirked before jumping away from the other. Itachi's hands immediately began to fly through the hand signs. Bringing his fingers to his lips, he blew. A massive fireball hurtled towards Kisame, forcing him to jump away or be engulfed its heat. The younger watched in amusement as Kisame patted his hair frantically. A bit singed. Asshole. Itachi drew his own weapon before lunging forward. A lesser man would have been struck down from the flawless attack. Kisame was not a lesser man by any means. Blade clashed blade in a fight for dominance. Kisame was the better swordsman, but Itachi was no slouch. Sparks flew as they clashed again and again, neither giving an inch. It would be an insult to the other. Giving one's all in training was a show of respect. Their respect for each other was one reason the training grounds was so far from the house. It would be a shame if their practice got out of hand, possibly destroying the house. Eyes flared red as he dodged what would have been a lethal blow. Kisame grinned, knowing the gloves were off now that he'd activated his Sharingan. Finally. Are you so anxious to get your ass handed to you? Enough talk. Kisame growled, charging forward. Itachi plowed his sword through the man's heart. The body went stiff before popped into nothing but water. Really, Kisame? Did you think I wouldn't know it was a clone? Nope. Saint want to see how long it takes you to find the real me. Kisame chuckled, 3 clones stepping from the shadows. Itachi narrowed his eyes. The world moved in slow motion for him as he gauged each clone. They began to crowd in, coming in fast from 3 sides. He hissed as he lunged away, a stray kunai ripping a hole in sleeve of one arm. Where had that come from? All 3 clones carried their sword, swinging them back and forth as he dodged agilely through the gauntlet of steel. Come on, Itachi-san. The Kisame clone snarled as he plowed his sword into Itachi's slender body. Instantly, the clone burst into several ravens. They scattered in all directions before disappearing from sight. A clone. A telling splash could be heard in the silence of the training field. Each of the clones burst into water, all beheaded. All that could be seen was deadly red eyes, a slight touch of bloodlust evident even from a distance away. Kisame swallowed heavily from his hiding place in the tree line. He reached for his sword, ready to join the fray for real when a kunai was pressed into his neck. If I was sent to kill you, you would be dead. Kisame's eyes grew wide as he glanced at the shadowed face. A popping sound burst on the field as the clone dissipated. Kisame blinked a few times. It was a clone the entire time. Kisame, you know I don't like to get my hands dirty unless I need to. Itachi smirked, putting away the sharp blade. His red eyes narrowed at the small bead of blood trickling down his friend's neck. I fucking can't believe it. You were a goddamned shadow. How in all of God's creation did Sasuke beat you? Kisame dusted his hands down his clothes to remove invisible bits of dirt. I let him. Itachi turned and disappeared into the forest. Itachi lunged from tree to tree, disappearing deep in the heavily wooded land. He kept his quick pace, agilely using each branch to propel him forward towards his destination. He didn't stop until he reached a clear pool at the base of a small mountain. A small waterfall rushed from a hidden crack in the mountain, keeping the water from going stagnant. Shedding his sandals, he dipped his feet into the crystalline water. The moon mirrored itself on the smooth pool. The night birds called to their mates, a whirring trill echoing back and forth. It amazed him how beautiful nature could be away from the power struggles of the major villages. It constantly renewed itself as the seasons passed. The death of an animal fed others, its remains nourishing the plants and trees which in turn feed animals. The cycle was perfect. A man could find peace in these settings. Not him, though. He stared into the pool, his reflection dark, barely visible. He'd tried so hard for so long to find peace and comfort with Kisame and his family. He tried and was unsuccessful. His sins weighed too heavily on his spirit. Sasuke weighed too heavily. He'd been certain Sasuke would be the hero his family name so desperately needed. Sasuke had a gentleness in him. Itachi had watched it grow and flourish. Even after that night, he'd watched his brother from afar. He'd developed connections with people, friendships. He'd proven he was better than just a tool. Until him, Orochimaru, that unrepentant devil, he'd given Sasuke a taste of what he could have. Power. All that he promised Sasuke would have eventually been his as he grew as a shinobi. Orochimaru simply promised it sooner. Why wait? His brother always had been impatient. Pulling his shirt from his body, he ran his fingers down the scars dotting his chest. Some were from his days in Anbu. Some were from Akatsuki missions, and some were from Sasuke. Standing, he stripped his pants before diving into the depths. The shock of the cold water rocketed through him, making him gasp as his head broke the surface. He shivered for a moment as his body acclimated itself to the temperature. Mountain water was always cold, coming from deep beneath the surface, away from any warmth of sunlight. The refreshing feel of it far outweighed the momentary agony of the first dip. Rolling to his back, he floated along, watching the twinkle of stars through the canopy of trees. He wondered how Konoha had changed. He had gotten word of Danzu's death. That much he did know. If he really tried, he could find more. The truth was, he didn't want to know. His village had forced him into a corner. Kill his family or have Konohagakure declare war on them. In war, the suffering would be great. He was given the option of making it relatively painless. The end would be the same, only the execution differed. Perhaps he was a coward, but he chose to do as he was told. He would never forget the pain and love in his mother's eyes as he struck her down. Mother, I tried to save Sasuke. I tried to make him into a hero. To use him to bring honor back to our family. Forgive me for failing you. He whispered before sinking below the surface, allowing the refreshing water to wash away the tears he refused to shed. It was hours later when he let himself silently into the house. His room, Spartanly decorated, greeted him. It was comprised of a bed, dresser, and bedside table. His weapons were neatly placed at varying intervals, all with easy access should he be required to move fast. A quiet knock on the door alerted him to the presence he'd sensed long before. Itachi-san, Kisame, he acknowledged, opening the door and allowing his friend into his small sanctuary. Are you sure about this? I can handle it alone if you don't think. I'll be fine, Kisame. I need to see my home. Maybe they've forgotten about you. It has been a while. Almost 6 years. Villages such as Konohagakure never forget. Well, see you in the morning. We can discuss strategy and I'll contact the client. Good night, Kisame. Itachi pulled the mask over the lower half of his face. Kisame did the same, much to his disgruntlement. He smirked at his partner. The mask was worse than Kisame's bare face. He probably should have just had Kisame use a transform jutsu, but the constant drain on his chakra would be hard, especially since he no longer possessed his chakra-draining sword to provide him with a constant stream of chakra. They're late, Kisame griped, pacing at the small gate outside of town. Calm yourself. You are drawing more attention than necessary. Hoshi-san. Kisame glanced up to see a wiry old man step from an impressive carriage as it approached the two. He arched a brow as the man approached, before bowing low. My name is Fuyuki. I am the guide for Lady Miko and her honorable son, Ryu. This is my associate, Shisui Obito. Itachi nodded at the introduction before walking around the carriage while Kisame talked itinerary with the servant. Hi. He glanced up too, stare into a pair of the darkest eyes he'd seen since his encounter with Sasuke. The boy the eyes belonged to appeared to be between 3 and 4. He reminded him so much of Sasuke, he actually thought he was a hallucination. The boy's eyes seemed to stare into his soul before he began giggling. Please forgive Ryu. He's only a boy and likes meeting new people. The woman who spoke was in her early 20s. There was nothing special about her. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. Her face, while average in looks, carried a gentleness that was rare in nobility. She reminded him greatly of his mother. He bowed respectfully to her. It's fine. My name is Miko. Thank you for escorting us home. You are the daimyo's daughter, yet you consider Konohagakure your home. My husband is in Konoha. Home is wherever he is. Then why is he not with you? He has responsibilities to the village. I used this time to allow him a chance to rest from being a father and to spend time with his neglected friends. He is so serious sometimes. I'm sure he will lighten up if he spends some time with them. She chuckled. Itachi couldn't help but smile. Definitely a Hyuga if she was talking about him being so serious. It was a shame her son didn't inherit the Byakugan. That blood trait was nearly as powerful as the Sharingan. He watched as she pulled the boy back inside the carriage. How does everything look, Obito-san? Kisame asked, strapping his weapon to his back. It's acceptable. We should get going. We have a long road ahead of us. Kisame took point, scouting ahead. Itachi created a few clones, sending them out to check the area for any suspicious characters. The sun shone down brightly, causing the day to heat up rather warm despite the area of the world they traveled through. Shisui-san, may we please stop for a few minutes? Ryu needs to run off some energy. Miko smiled tiredly from the carriage. If you can wait about half an hour, we should be nearing a small river. Air is a place there where you could cool off and maybe have your lunch. Itachi offered, earning a chuckle from Kisame. Thank you. She smiled gratefully. Itachi ignored Kisame as he moved back to walk alongside him. She's married, with a kid. I'm not interested in her. Come off it, you offered up information to her about a nice place to stop. You like her. Kisame was now grinning widely. Had much was evident even through his mask. I'm not interested. You are. Huh, trust me, I would never fuck my mother and Lady Miko reminds me very much of her. Oh, Itachi left his friend Gru. MBLING while he jumped onto the carriage to direct the driver to the small area just off the main road. While the lady ate quietly, Itachi kept a careful eye on the boy as he ran chasing butterflies. His hair was thick, tufted up in areas wildly. He reminded him of Sasuke at that age, all happy smiles and already a taste for adventure. Do you have children? He glanced down at Miko. No, my profession does not allow much time for romance. You sound like my husband. Our marriage was arranged but I love him dearly. May I ask you something? Itachi inclined his head, not really wanting to answer anything personal while at the same time unable to refuse her request. Why do you wear a mask? To hide my face. He answered abruptly, perhaps even a bit harshly. It wasn't her fault. She was merely curious. He watched Ryu move closer towards the tree line. He darted quickly towards him as a scream echoed in the silence. His heart pounded in his chest as he watched a wolf creep towards the boy. It was obvious the creature was mad, probably sick or injured. Normally the creatures were too skittish to approach humans. His eyes flared red as he tossed a kunai towards the animal just as it lunged for the boy. Miko's terrified scream was barely audible to him as he pulled the animal carcass from the boy's body. His hands ran over him, searching for any wound. Tear-stained eyes streaked at him before his arms were full of frightened child. He quickly deactivated his eyes as the others approached. Ryu, she cried, taking the boy from his arms. He's fine, just frightened. I checked him over, Itachi said as the boy buried his face in his mother's neck. Thank you for protecting him. Thank you. She continued to whisper words of gratitude as she cuddled her child close. Obito-san. Itachi crouched by Kisame as he examined the dead animal. On closer inspection, the animal was obviously not a natural wolf. The blood slowly leaking from the wound smelled almost putrid. The teeth in its mouth were oddly shaped. What is it? This animal has been experimented on. You checked the boy for injuries. Yes, he's fine. We should move on quickly. I've learned to never assume there is only one. We can worry later about what it was. Itachi nodded in agreement, glad to see the woman and her son being assisted into the carriage. He hoped the entire journey would not be filled with this much excitement. Otherwise, it would be a very long trip indeed. The campfire crackled warmly before Itachi as he stroked his kunai over the whetstone. The scrape of steel over stone created a hissing sound, breaking the near silence of the small tree-surrounded clearing. His eyes darted towards the carriage where the sound of two set of breathing reached his trained ears. Following the encounter at the border of mountain country, the remainder of the trip had been exceedingly boring. The pace was slower than he would have liked, but the presence of hired guardians must have kept any thieves or bandits at bay. He was thankful. He didn't want to have to kill in front of the boy but wouldn't hesitate to do so if the need arose. Thinking of the boy, he could stop the slight twitching of lips. Ryu was as energetic as ever, eyes popping open every morning at sunrise and not stopping until long after camp had been made. His energy kept the trip from being entirely unbearable. They'd crossed the border into fire country the day before, causing both him and Kisame to be especially on their guard. Tonight would be the last day of camping. They would stop tomorrow at a small respectable inn he and Kisame knew before continuing on into Konoha the following day. They would need to push extra hard tomorrow in order to make it to the inn before it became too dark to travel. Both he and Kisame were tense. This was the first time either had come so close to one of the primary hidden villages in over 6 years. Neither let down their guard for even a moment. Both were still listed in the bingo books. Itachi's supposed death gave him a bit of cover, but Kisame was still listed as whereabouts unknown, a dangerous thing to be. The danger, if anything, stirred Kisame's blood not to keep his natural violent tendencies at bay for now. Obito-san. Itachi lifted his gaze from his task to meet sparking eyes. It hurt every time he looked at the boy. The resemblance to Sasuke was so remarkable. He'd caught himself several times nearly calling him Sasuke. It wasn't that he looked so much like Sasuke, but his personality mirrored that of his brother from their childhood. His personality, and his eyes. His eyes held that same look of adoring hero worship and something else he'd thought he was the last to possess. You should be sleeping. We are going to push hard tomorrow. To reach the inn in Green Leaf before dark. Itachi turned his gaze away, trying to ignore him. Of course, the boy would not allow that. Since the first day, Ryu had latched onto him like a sort of surrogate father. He hung on his every word, begged to ride on his shoulders. Just as when Sasuke was a boy, Ryu refused to be ignored by Itachi. The boy pouted as he inched across the clearing towards Itachi. Mama snores. A smile crept along Itachi's hidden face. Don't tell her that. She might get embarrassed. Mama's don't get embarrassed. Ryu grinned, settling beside Itachi. A cold wind chose that moment to whistle through the trees, making the boy beside him cuddle even closer. Itachi moved, opening his thick black cloak to make room for the boy inside its warmth. You smell nice. Like daddy. Itachi couldn't stop the small snort of mirth from escaping his lips. For someone who hadn't bathed in nearly a week, he was glad he still smelled decent. I'm glad you approve. Will you stay with me when we get home? We can pee-way ninjas. Daddy pee-ways with me sometimes. And Uncle Ruto. Ryu yawned again, crawling into Itachi's lap. I'm afraid I can't stay with you. Why? I have to go home. Why? I just do. Don't you like me? Itachi swore he heard a sniffle. The pang was back in his heart. Cursed kids. He hated them. He hated how they latched onto him. He hated how they seemed to worm their way through his defenses. He hated how much they made him remember the days when his little brother doted on his every word. Yes, he hated children. I like you, Itachi said quietly. Yay, then you are staying with me. You can sleep in my room. I have a big boy bed. That settled in Ryu's mind. He snuggled closer to Itachi. Setting aside the weapons, he stretched his legs into a more comfortable position as the boy made himself at home on his lap. His hands reached up to stroke the soft locks of hair as the boy's breath evened out, signaling his descent into sleep. I keep telling you, you need to find you a busty woman with nice hips and have a litter of little dark-haired boys and girls. You would make a good father. Kisame settled beside Itachi before the fire. That will never happen. So you say. He's not a Hyuga. Itachi tucked the boy more comfortably into his chest before glancing over at Kisame. Course not. Those stuck-up prudes probably reproduce asexually. Kisame snickered at the thought of the illustrious Hyuga clan reproducing by budding as some sea life did. He's an Uchiha. Kisame choked on the bottle of water he was downing, turning incredulous eyes towards his partner. You are joking. No, Itachi, Kisame hissed, risking their cover by using his real name but needing to emphasize his point. It's the eyes. They don't lie. Itachi closed his own, not wanting to hope that for the slightest moment Sasuke was alive. The last 3 living Uchihas had been Madara, Itachi, and Sasuke. That didn't mean there weren't a few bastards roaming around. His own father had kept a civilian mistress in Konoha. When bastard children were produced, the elders of the clan would be brought in with medic nins. The eyes of the infants were thoroughly examined. Any child developing the nearly invisible red sheen of the Sharingan was taken into the Uchiha clan and given the name, but who knew how many bastards out there were whose Sharingan remained due are meant only to pass on the trait to their children or grandchildren. The Sharingan eyes were a mutation of evolution, just as were the Hyuga Byakugan and Pain's Rinnegan. Who's to say that under the right circumstances, a dormant Sharingan couldn't be born again from someone of diluted Uchiha blood? He wondered who the boy's father was. Anything was possible. Hell, it could be anyone. You don't hink Sasuke. Kisame brought a hand up to stroke his chin thoughtfully. I mean, I know we've been out of the loop for a while, but I would think the revival of the Uchiha clan would have made bigger news. When I last saw your brother, Madara had twisted him so far, I don't think you would have recognized him. How do you know this kid is an Uchiha anyway? I don't go around believing every blue-haired person is my long-lost cousin. His eyes haven't developed, but I can see the Sharingan sitting in wait. Itachi's own eyes bled to red, the small black tomos spinning lazily as they gazed at Ryu's face. He lifted a finger to raise the lid of one eye. Almost immediately, a ring of red outlined Ryu's eye in response to Itachi's Sharingan. Itachi-san, let's just get these people delivered and go home. I don't want you digging around, looking for some long-lost fifth cousin, twice removed. You'll draw attention to yourself. You might be wearing a mask, but anyone who's met you in battle will remember your eyes. A person doesn't forget eyes like yours, even if you don't use your Sharingan. Kisame scooped the boy from Itachi's arms, placing him safely beside his mother in the carriage. Itachi nodded. His guilt over what he'd done weighed heavily on him. The closer they came to Konoha, the more keenly he felt its pressure. Kisame was right, of course. He was letting his emotions get too involved. There would come a time when he would need to accept punishment for what he'd done, but he found himself not wanting to give up his life for simply doing what he was ordered. He had come to terms with his family's death. No, if punishment was rendered, it would be for what he did to Sasuke. Taking a breath, he deactivated his Sharingan, staring off into the silent forest surrounding the borders of Fire Country. He lifted his gaze to the stars winking at him from between the canopy of trees. They looked different here. No less beautiful but not as bright as in Mountain Country. They seemed further away, lacking the illusion of being able to almost touch them. As he watched, one by one they began to fade as the light began coloring the east. He contemplated Kisame's words before coming to a decision. For the first time since his parents' death, he would visit their resting place. He needed to see them, to tell them of his life. Perhaps Konoha was honorable enough to bury Sasuke with his family, and he could do the same for his brother. He smiled. He wasn't worried about it. He'd given Naruto a small bit of his chakra, hoping that the other would succeed in his mission to save his friend. If Sasuke was dead, as all evidence stated, he would have made damn sure he was buried with his family. His memories of the blonde Jinchuriki were of an amazingly strong hellion, determined to save Sasuke from himself. Uzumaki Naruto. That was a name forever branded in his memory. The utter devotion he showed for his friend touched Itachi deeply. In later days, when he lay broken under Kisame and Kiko's care, he thought a lot. During one of those reminiscing moments, he recalled his meeting of the blonde boy and experienced for the first time jealousy towards his brother. He read what it would be like to have a friend such as that. Kisame, good friend that he was, would not devote every particle of his being towards saving him with no thought of himself, especially now that he possessed a family. No, Uzumaki Naruto was one of a kind. Stoking the fire a little before tossing a few spare bits of kindling, he set the pot for water in the warm ashes. The others would begin stirring soon. He wanted to be on the road in no less than an hour. The sooner they reached Konoha, the sooner he could face his past. The gates of Konoha loomed familiar for the exhausted troop. A night in an inn did little to comfort the weary travelers. Exhaustion didn't stop the happy chattering of Ryu as he babbled on about his daddy and how he missed him. Itachi shifted nervously on the balls of his feet, eyeing the guards as they passed easily through the gates with minimum fuss. Time may have dulled the memories of shinobi, but caution had long been burned into Itachi's very being. He was sure his mask would quell possibility of subtle recognition, but a shinobi who let down his guard was soon a dead one. Kisame noticed Itachi's subtle movements signaling nervousness and slapped him heartily on the shoulder. "I know you have places you want to see. Go on, I'll finish up this shit and get our money. I'll meet you by the gates in 2 hours. Itachi nodded his thanks before flickering away, taking to the rooftops. He moved faster than the average shinobi, his movements unnoticed by most. It wasn't uncommon to see shinobi moving along the walls or roofs. Even those who noticed him paid him no mind. The first thing he noticed as he landed at the edge of the village was the long empty buildings in what was the former Uchiha district had been destroyed. He was grateful his hands were hidden beneath his cloak. They clenched so hard, he was sure his palms were bleeding from his nails. He forced calm into his mind as he stepped towards the large garden now standing in place of the residences of his childhood. Few people paid him mind as they strolled past. It took every ounce of strength in him to keep from showing his distress. His eyes darted quickly from person to person. The beautiful arrangements of flower beds and benches gave the place a peaceful air. As he made his way towards the center, he saw a large black stone monument, surrounded by flowers. The mask, covering his face, hid his frown as he approached cautiously. It was a simple rectangle of dark marble. He leaned in to see a listing of names engraved on the stone. His eyes widened in shock. Here, listed in honor, was the name of every Uchiha killed on that fateful night. His hand shook as he reached up to run his fingers over the names, recalling the faces of each and every one. His hand lingered as it reached Uchiha Makoto. He swallowed heavily. His mother would have been honored by her name being engraved on this stone. Of all the blood staining his katana that night, hers was the most vibrant. Despite all he did, all the blood on his hands, her eyes shone with love even until her last breath. His fingers trailed over the remaining names until reaching the end. There, carved in alongside every other member of the family was his name. Uchiha Itachi. Itachi stumbled away from the monument. It was one thing to place the name of his mother on a monument. It was quite another to have his own listed among all those who died. Especially since he was the weapon who struck them down. "Are you all right, boy?" Itachi's mind cleared enough to face the speaker. The elderly woman brushed past him to touch one of the names. "I never understood why it took them so long to build this garden. My best friend was one of the ones killed that night. When the truth came out about it, I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to keep blaming that boy. After they built this place, I began coming. The sun is nice to these old bones." After sitting and thinking a while, I remember the gentle eyes of that boy. I knew then he couldn't have done what he did just for the pleasure of it. It's a shame really. He was so polite. "Why? Who built this? Are you sure you're feeling all right? I can call over one of the young people to help you to a medic. Please." "Who?" "Well, the entire village. The Hokage. Several of the major families." Once it was revealed the circumstances of the massacre, people showed up. It was about time they tore down those houses. It wasn't right to leave them standing up as some sort of grim reminder. This is a much nicer way to remember them. The old woman narrowed her eyes at Itachi. "You remind me a lot of that boy. Same gentle eyes. He didn't have the sadness I see in yours though. Are you sure you don't want to see a medic? Thank you for your assistance." Itachi whispered. Performing a series of hand signs rapidly, he disappeared in a puff of gray smoke. When he opened his eyes, he found himself standing before the Konoha cemetery. This was the place he dreaded the most. How he remained on his feet was a mystery to him. It felt as if a string was tied to his soul, pulling him towards where he knew he would see them. It wasn't hard to find. The Uchiha port, ion of the cemetery was probably the most distinct. The family crest gleamed brightly above the gate leading to that portion of the cemetery. In all the years since their death, he had not stepped foot here. For too long his life was darkened by the memory of that night and the blood that stained his eyes red. It was hard to believe it had been so long. He felt like a child again as he stood before the markers. He could clearly see his mother's warm smile as he entered the kitchen. She always teased him about how much he looked like his father. He could remember the pleased look in his father's face on the day he was accepted into Anbu. Falling to his knees, he bowed low, his brow touching the soft grass growing around the tomb. So many times he had played out what he would say to them. No, that he was kneeling before their markers, he was at a loss for words. He was a grown man, yet he could not find the words to express his grief, held deep inside for so long. What could one say at a time such as this? "I'm sorry" seemed far too meager an offering. Closing his eyes, he prayed the tears would not come. He prayed for control. He prayed for some sort of comfort to be given where he knew there was none. In all his hurt and confusion, he said the only thing that came to mind. "Mother, I miss you." Kisame fought back a yawn as carriage pulled to a stop before a gated estate. He rolled his eyes as the head escort offered him a pouch of money. Now he might not be the most calculating individual, but Hoshigaki Kisame was not stupid. He nodded to the man before settling on a nearby bench to count the money. He would be ready to charge after the man should they be shorted even one bit. As he was counting out the money, he heard Ryu scream in excitement. "Daddy!" Now, had any other child cried out for their father, he would have ignored them as he did most civilians. This, however, was an interesting case. Since speaking with Itachi-san the other day, he was intensely curious as to who the father of the boy was. It was obvious he got his Uchiha genes from the father, as the woman was from mountain country and very unlikely to have provided them. Shoving his money in his cloak, he peeked through the gate. To say he was shocked was a massive understatement. In fact, he was so shocked, he might have died on the spot had he not been the healthy individual he was. Cradling Ryu in his arms was none other than Uchiha Sasuke. He looked different. His eyes held the same sadness Itachi carried with him. His body was a bit taller than he remembered, but it still possessed that and muscle that most likely made him deadly on the battlefield. The largest difference was the small smile gracing his features as he cradled his son in his arms. It wasn't the hateful smirk he'd become famous for, but an honest-to-God smile. "Holy fuck," hissed Kisame, stumbling back. He was sure the younger Uchiha, if not killed, would have been at the very least imprisoned. Here he was, married with a kid and to a noble no less. Who would have thought the little brat was Itachi's nephew all along? Deciding this was something Itachi needed to know, he raced through the alleyways to the old Uchiha district. He was just as shocked as his partner to see the lush public garden in place of the once empty houses. He racked his brain, searching it for any clue as to where Itachi would go next. Closing his eyes, he searched for any sign of Itachi's chakra. He cursed his own tracking skills. He was more of a fighter, not a tracker. Distinguishing one chakra from another was delicate work that far exceeded his skills. If not for the sudden flare towards the east, he wouldn't have found him at all. Itachi had a very distinctive chakra signal when angry or upset. It was probably why he kept himself quiet, locking away his feelings from others. An upset Itachi was easy to track. Racing through the streets, he skidded to a halt before the cemetery. Oh, God, if he was seen before the Uchiha graves, there would be hell to pay by the authorities, not to mention the shock knowing Uchiha Itachi was still alive and kicking. "Itachi-san," gasped out Kisame as he found his longtime partner kneeling before two stone monuments. No doubt those of his parents. Itachi sat up immediately. His eyes shone red, but no tears graced his cheeks. His eyes darkened considerably at the interruption. "What is it? Fuck. You were a goddamned hard person to find. You know that princess and her brat we just brought here? They are Uchihas." Kisame ground out. Itachi released a pent-up breath. For a moment he'd thought something happened. The way Kisame came, calling him by his given name, he'd feared their cover had been blown, forcing them to flee quickly. Obviously, Such wasn't the case if that was all Kisame had to say. Perhaps their discussion 2 days ago was finally sinking into his brain. I realize this, Kisame. I was the one who told you. Itachi stood slowly, bowing low to his parents' grave before moving towards where Kisame stood. No, you don't. I don't mean they have Uchiha blood, I mean they are goddamn Uchihas. That boy, Ryu, his name is Uchiha. He doesn't just have a few wild Uchiha genes, he's the real thing. Born into the name Uchiha. He's Sasuke's spawn. Kisame hissed. Itachi turned his face sharply to Kisame. His eyes bled to red, spinning wildly. He may have lost his Mangekyo, but he was still a master of the Sharingan. That's not humorous, Kisame. Do I look like I'm joking? The last I saw of your brother was him looking like a wild animal with no thought for anyone but himself. If that man is not Sasuke, he's his fucking twin. Kisame growled, dropping his gaze so not to be hypnotized by the spinning Tomo. Itachi simply stood there. He heard Kisame's words. His brain processed them rapidly as it did every bit of data. He heard them but could not comprehend their meaning. Sasuke. No, it was a lie. Kisame was mistaken. It had been 6, nearly 7 years. It was Kisame's brain playing tricks on him. He thought he saw Sasuke because of what they had discussed. Itachi-san, let's leave. I have the money. Let's go home. No, Itachi-san, you can wear all the masks you want. You would never be able to hide from Sasuke for very long. Itachi didn't respond. Instead, he calmly walked from the cemetery. He would never disgrace his parents by arguing with Kisame at their final resting place. Tucking his hands into this cloak, he moved through the gates and towards town. Itachi-san, where are you going? Konohagakure is not forgiving. When one of their weapons becomes faulty, they destroy it. Sasuke is dead. I will show you, Itachi said quietly, fighting back the hope that somehow, Sasuke had been welcomed back in the fold. No, he would not get his hopes up. The only hope he had was that somehow the Uchiha blood had been revived. Itachi-san, I know you don't want to believe it, but I know what I saw. Kisame matched Itachi's stride as He made their way down streets Itachi knew by heart. Kisame, even if it was Sasuke, I would need to see with my own eyes. I could not just leave without knowing. And if it isn't, I need to see that with my own eyes as well. Itachi couldn't stop his stomach from tightening as they neared the gated house. As houses went, it was probably one of the nicer ones. It wasn't as large as the one he grew up in, but was obviously well taken care of, offering plenty of room for a family. Itachi was trained to see what was beneath. His eyes darted quickly, assessing any possible weaknesses. He'd been a shinobi too long not to. Sending a wave of chakra to his legs, he easily leapt over the gate, landing silently in the garden backyard. He took note of the koi pond and very balanced feel of the flora. More than average care went into this garden. It reminded him very much of the garden his mother had kept before her death. He couldn't stop the shiver working through him. Though he had no plans on harming anyone, he couldn't stop the flush of adrenaline that usually came with closing in on one's prey. A presence appeared behind him. He didn't have to turn to know it was Kisame. Fuck Itachi. You are going to get us arrested, but damn, I'll give them a fight to remember. Grinned Kisame, his fingers popping in excitement. Itachi arched a brow and smiled, small twitching of lips beneath his mask. What about Keiko? She knows how I am. I'll just make sure one of us gets out of this alive. Just so you know, if I die, I'll haunt you if you so much as touch her. Kisame growled. Idiot. Itachi ducked beneath a tree, edging closer to the house. Giggles from Ryu gave him pause. Wait here. He slid the door open silently, gliding like a ghost as he entered. Years of training kept his footsteps unnoticeable. He was about to open the door when a steel blade stabbed through the wall. A slower man would have been impaled on it. If anything, Itachi was fast. He heard the whistle of the blade as it struck. Any accomplished swordsman would recognize that sound anywhere. He pulled a kunai from a hidden pocket in his cloak, quickly using it to deflect another slash of the blade. He wasn't Sir. He avoided looking in the face of the other. The chakra felt so familiar, it hurt. He didn't want to see. He wasn't sure he could bear to be disappointed. Who are you? Growled his opponent. might have kept his eyes blind to the face, but there was no denying the deep husky voice of his brother. His iron-tight control wavered. In all the years since that one fateful night, his control never slipped. In all that time, he remained completely untouchable. Never once had he allowed anything to get under his skin. He'd always kept his emotions at a distance until now. It was a slight faltering of movement. To the untrained eye, it was unperceivable. To his opponent, it was the perfect opening. He felt the blade slice through his side. It was rather surprising, actually. There were very few who could land a blow on him. Pain shot up his side in a harsh burning rush. He ignored it as he was trained to do. Sasuke. Itachi-san. Kisame caught him as he stumbled backwards. Itachi shed through hooded eyes as the face haunting most of his nightmares stared at him, a look of horror plastered across Sasuke's face. He could feel his body going into shock, partially from his wound and partially from seeing his brother alive. He blinked back the tears. His blood-stained hand reached towards his brother, trembling. It was as before all over again. He could still feel the pain tearing through his body as he used the last bit of his strength to lift his hand. Both had been at their limits. The look of horror crossing Sasuke's face then was very much the same one gracing it now. Brother. Kisame, not wanting to risk saying longer, tossed Itachi over his shoulder and fled from the shock-ridden Sasuke. He was smart enough to use the moment to his advantage. It wouldn't last long. Sasuke was likely to recover from his shock quickly and alert Anbu. Sasuke's alive, Itachi whispered as darkness threatened his vision. Sasuke's alive. There was quite a bit of commotion at the gateway into the village. So much commotion a frown replaced the cheery smile normally splitting Naruto's face. He grabbed a confused genin by the shoulder, determined to discover the reason for the gossiping confusion among the ranks. Chakra was flaring excitedly across the city and he didn't like it. Something had happened while he was away. Hey kid, what's up with everyone? Was there an attack? Naruto plastered a comforting smile on his face, a trait learned from Sai, and waited for a replay from the very nervous genin. The Uchiha house was attacked. The boy winced as the Junin's grip tightened painfully on his shoulder. Naruto didn't respond. He released the genin, taking to the rooftops with a speed of which his father would have been proud. He didn't even bother waiting around to see if the terrified youth had anything else he wished to include in the very short debriefing of the current events surrounding the Uchiha household. All Naruto cared about was reaching his friend and family. Sasuke. Naruto landed at a run, racing towards the opened door. Two Anbu attempted to refuse him access, which in turn sent rivulets of anger coursing through him. Of course, it wasn't like the days of his childhood when such anger would have sent him into an uncontrollable state, allowing the monster inside him little moments of freedom to vent its rage on any who dared step before its vision. These days, he possessed quite a bit more control and restraint thanks to the training of both Tenzo as well as the sage training he underwent at 15. I would suggest you step aside, or I will see to it that you can't walk for a week, Naruto growled, mentally pushing away the tendrils of hate swirling up in him from the nine-tailed monster. He might be in complete control of himself, but the monster was never one to be discouraged by such a thing as human willpower. Any chance he saw, his tales of madness and hatred would coil up in the back of his carrier's mind, offering asked of what Naruto continued to deny himself. Ultimate power. It was the most addictive substance in the world. He remembered well the taste of it pouring through his veins as the power of the Fox FL ooded his pathways with astronomically powerful chakra. He still longed for the taste just as an alcoholic thirsting for a drink. There was so much he could do with just a fraction of its power. Thog. HTS such as those were where the danger lay. One could never take just a little. The little taste would bring on a hunger for more. Just a little more couldn't hurt. Those words would lead to recreating the nightmare he never wanted to experience again. The pain alone was beyond anything he had ever experienced. The ripping of flesh, healed by the chakra only to be ripped from him again. Naruto pushed back the tantalizing taste of what he could have, his eyes flashing dangerously to the two Anbu. Let him through. A dry chuckle followed the order as Naruto stepped through the doorway. He arched a brow at the voice, wondering just what happened to bring even the Hokage out of the tower. Normally Sakura kept him practically chained to the chair behind his desk. Kakashi. A visible brow RCHED as a hand gestured for him to continue. Naruto gritted his teeth at the amused eyes. God, he was annoying. Sama. Much better. Naruto. You are getting the hang of it. It won't be long before you say it without even thinking. Kakashi's unseen smirk wasn't lost on Naruto as he lifted his middle finger in a vulgar gesture before scanning the area. He noted the torn screens, obviously made from a sword. There were a few random kunai around, but other than some scuffle marks he'd noticed in the grass with a trail, nothing seemed horribly out of the ordinary. He was actually surprised Sasuke hadn't splattered his attacker's organs all over the place. His friend, even on a good day, wasn't the most sane individual if his property was assaulted, especially since he'd become a father. What happened, Kakashi? Naruto asked, jaw clenching at the pointed look he received from the Hokage. Sama. Oh, so much has happened. I think you had best see it for yourself. Kakashi led the way, ending the sliding door to reveal the family room where Sasuke, Miko, and Ryu sat quietly. He was relieved to see all three were alive and safe, but the scene bothered him. It wasn't something a casual observer would have seen. It was emptiness, a horrible emptiness brought on by deep-set guilt. It was understandable, he supposed. After killing your own brother, that kind of trauma didn't just vanish. Madara's interference hadn't helped either. Sasuke's mental state all those years ago was something Naruto avoided thinking of unless he had to. He'd nearly lost his best friend to the all-encompass madness Madara dragged the entire shinobi world into. Hey bastard, what happened? You look like hell. Naruto frowned as the vacant eyes turned to stare through him, almost as if he wasn't there. Naruto. Ryu jumped from his seat beside his mother, rushing towards the blonde shinobi who easily scooped him up to settle on a hip. Naruto, I told you to watch your mouth around Ryu. It took me a month to keep him from calling Sasuke. You know, Miko growled, though her eyes held a gleam of fondness. Naruto had the good grace to blush at the admonition. Sorry, Miko, I was just worried. They said you had been attacked. What's wrong with Sasuke? He's not dead. Sasuke lifted a shaking hand to his eyes. Whose eyes did he give me if they weren't Itachi's? Come again. Naruto knew in those dark days when his friend was all but lost to him, his eyes were nearly gone, destroyed from overuse of the Sharingan and all the abilities it came with. Everyone including Sasuke had assumed Madara had transplanted Itachi's eyes in order to replace Sasuke's nearly dead ones. I saw him, Itachi. He wore a mask, but I knew it was him. No one else has eyes like that, eyes that seem to see directly into your very being. It's like he knows all your secrets, all your weaknesses. I thought he died. I thought. Sasuke ran his hand through his hair, mussing the already spiky locks. Are you saying Uchiha Itachi was here? Where has he been all these years? What was he doing here? Where is he now? Naruto was thoroughly confused. He, like everyone, assumed Itachi Uchiha died with honor. If I knew that, do you think I'd be sitting here? Sasuke yelled the question, his body practically radiating distress and confusion. Miko, I think you should take Ryu and go get something to eat. Naruto hand off the little boy shaking in his arms at his father's obvious distress. The woman nodded shakily, taking her son and moving towards the kitchen. Sasuke, you need to calm down. You are scaring your wife and son. Kakashi settled in a plush chair, his visible eye pulled down in concentration. Calm down. How do you expect me to calm down? I stabbed the brother I thought had been dead for 7 years. How else am I supposed to react? Sasuke began pacing before the fireplace, his hands clenching and unclenching in what Naruto assumed was nervous tension. What happened? Naruto asked, feeling blind in the conversation. Sasuke sensed an intruder in the house. Itachi probably didn't think his brother was that good at chakra sensing, or his own was fluxing uncontrollably. Accounts say he was wearing a mask similar to mine, so we can assume he didn't want to be recognized. He's been marked as deceased in the bingo book for 7 years. He probably could have walked into town and not been recognized easily. Kakashi's eyes swept towards where Sasuke had stopped pacing to stare off towards the window. Sasuke attacked, thinking it was someone trying to kill him or his family. He injured Itachi. He must have caught his brother off guard. Uchiha Itachi isn't the type to be easily injured. Surprisingly enough, Hoshigaki Kisame was with him. He's been off the radar, we assumed he was laying low. They escaped, but I would imagine they are moving slow. From the amount of blood on the lawn, they'll have to stop soon and treat his wound or he won't make it far at all. They can't have gotten far then. Naruto exclaimed. Hokage-sama. A masked Anbu crouched before Kakashi, his head bowed. We found a blood trail. It's fairly heavy, heading eastward. What are your orders? Kakashi brought his hand to his chin, stroking the skin through the mask. I'm going after him. Sasuke stood, already strapping one weapons. I can't let you do that. You are too emotionally charged as is. It's likely you won't be able to control yourself. Kakashi shook his head negatively. I'm not going to kill him, Sasuke growled, his eyes flashing. Again, was unspoken as he glared at his Hokage. Naruto jumped to his feet. I'll go. You know I'll bring him back. There had to be a reason he came back. If he wanted to hurt anyone, he would have acted before now. Naruto, you just got back from a Class A mission. You look exhausted and I'm sure the stress of worry for Sasuke and his family didn't help either. I don't think. Kakashi began, shaking his head. You know I've more than a new GH energy for a simple retrieval mission. Naruto balked, his own indignation joining Sasuke's. This isn't your typical retrieval mission. This is Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame. Both are highly trained and potentially dangerous men. I know how strong you are. The entire village knows, but you've been away on a mission for 3 months. Kakashi attempted to get his point across to the young man before him. Sasuke slammed his fist against the wall, drawing the attention of all in the room. If you won't let me go, then let Naruto go. If he doesn't go, I will, even if you order me not to. You two are worse than dogs with bones. Kakashi rubbed his head tiredly. Have it your way. Uchiha, you stay. Uzumaki, you go. Naruto winced at the use of last names. Kakashi was pissed and it would likely be C-rank missions for a while for the both of them. A glance at Sasuke showed him the other was thinking along the same route. At least they'd made sure one of them would be sent to retrieve Itachi. His name alone was likely to have any Anbu attempt to use more force than necessary and end up dead. This way was best all around. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Oh, so now you use the honorific. Kakashi grumbled. Gear up, Naruto. You leave in 15 minutes. Itachi-san, we need to take care of that wound. We are giving them a trail straight to us. Kisame shifted, pulling Itachi higher on his back. Just make towards the river. We can dress the wound there. Itachi bit the inside of his gums to prevent the whimper of pain. The wound wasn't fatal, it simply hurt like hell and bleed a little too much for comfort. Another 5 minutes of fast moving had the two pausing beside the large river running through fire country. The rushing water provided a dull roar, masking the sounds of the forest as it wove through the trees towards the ocean, miles away. Itachi grunted as he slumped against a tree. His body went into autopilot, parting his bloodied cloak to reveal the deep slash in his side. He grimaced at the sight but, grateful it was made with a smooth blade. It would be easier to treat as opposed to injuries with a serrated blade. Fuck, that's a deep wound, Kisame hissed, his teeth tearing open a med kit. Just sew me up, I'll heal enough so it won't be an immediate problem. Itachi grunted at the first slide of the needle through his skin. It was the only sound he allowed to escape his lips. He'd felt much worse, though it never got easier. Anesthetic was too risky when they were on borrowed time. He could deal with the pain. He evened out his breathing in and out. The minutes ticked by as Kisame pulled the needle through the sliced skin, pulling the edges of the flesh together once more. Though neither were trained in high-level medical skills, any shinobi worth his salt knew basic first aid and healing jutsus. Having a Sharingan helped as well, allowing him access to the appropriate jutsu's hand seals. Both had sewed up each other more than once though. Kisame had considerable less experience as Itachi preferred to fight at a distance, whereas the other enjoyed the thrill of close combat. We need to get moving. We've already spent 10 minutes here. They won't be long behind us. Kisame began sorting through their packs, attempting to determine what could be left behind to lessen the weight. Itachi lifted a chakra-charged hand to the wound. Didn't possess the skills of a medic nin, but he did know enough to heal the injury to stop the blood flow and lessen the pain. What weapons do we have? Some shuriken, kunai, and your katana. I've got my sword and some kunai. Kisame tossed Itachi a significantly lighter pouch. Senbon, I can't believe you still carry those. Don't leave anything that points to mountain country. You can't risk them searching what you leave. Itachi's quick eyes scanned the scattered remains of a few changes of clothes and equipment. Wait, what? Kisame watched his partner strap on the weapons pack, tugging, often tossing aside his mask to reveal the beautiful face so resembling his mother. I'm staying. I need to talk to Sasuke. Itachi closed his eyes. He needed to make sure Kisame got away. He might live through being captured. Kisame was still listed in the bingo book as a missing nin of Mist. There was no getting around it. Itachi became a missing nin for his country, Kisame did so for himself. The most he could hope for was to be executed painlessly. Itachi refused to add another death to his conscience. Keiko and Izumi needed Kisame, especially with the new baby. Itachi-san, I'm not leaving you for those Konoha wolves. They will tear you apart. You'll be imprisoned. You aren't a hero to them. You are still in the bingo book even if they thought you dead. Now stop acting suicidal and get off your ass. Kisame strapped his bags to his hips beneath the thick cloak. We can't outrun them, Kisame. I won't be able to keep up with the pace for long. This is only a temporary patch. I can hold them off long enough for you to get enough of a head start to disappear. Think of your family. It can only end two ways. Either we both run and they catch us, or I stay behind to hold them off while you escape. Itachi shed his torn cloak, revealing the slender, well-muscled body beneath. Unlike Kisame, his muscles were lean and hard, giving him a quick build as opposed to Kisami's much heavier musculature. Blood darkened the side of the black shirt he wore. Intense eyes focused on his partner. You know it's the truth. Why are you doing this? Kisame mumbled. Itachi's eyes flared red, the black tomo spinning lazily as he folded his hands over his abdomen. Then consider this settling the debt I owe you. Fine. Far be it for me to interfere when you've set your mind, Kisame snorted. You had just better not die. Izumi would be sad. He'd get over it. Now get out of here. I can already feel them half a mile away. Take to the river. They'll lose your scent faster. Kisame nodded at Itachi's instructions and took quickly to the water, leaving the other to ready himself for the incoming shinobi. Less than 3 minutes passed. The roar of the river and the hiss of the wind rough the trees provided background music for Itachi as relaxed his mind, conserving what remained of his chakra. His glowing red eyes missed not a single movement, from the drop of a leaf to the firs. Shinobi entering the small clearing where he stood. He had to say he was surprised Sasuke wasn't leading the small team of Anbu coming after him. Even though his brother knew the truth, he imagined he would have wanted to be there when they caught up. The Kyuubi vessel's presence wasn't so much a shock. He'd sensed him nearby as they exited the village. Sasuke's connection with the blonde ninja explained his presence. Are you Uchiha Itachi? His voice has deepened, mused Itachi as he nodded slowly. His eyes continued to spin slowly, memorizing every movement. The only one among them who would even offer a challenge was the blonde standing before him. It was sad showing of the standards of Anbu unless they expected him to come with no fight. You look different, Naruto said, his eyes not daring to look into the dangerously spinning eyes. So do you, Uzumaki Naruto. I should thank you for saving my brother. I must say I lost hope and assumed you had failed. Itachi smiled wistfully at the blonde. Yeah, well, we thought you were dead too. Naruto scratched at his cheek almost apologetically. I should have been, Itachi murmured, his thoughts drifting over the events of the last few years. Will you come back quietly? Naruto asked, his eyes now scanning the area for Kisame. Itachi smirked. That depends. On what? On whether or not you give up on following Kisame. A small part of him wished they would say no. His hands itched to perform the signs for one of the many jutsus spinning through his mind. His eyes counted 4 Anbu other than Uzumaki. They would be easily taken care of should he need to attack. Is that why you stayed behind? To buy him time? Naruto asked, keeping his pose as relaxed as possible. Do we have a deal? Itachi dug his feet into the ground. Hands ready to speed through motions he was sure would take care of at least 2 of the Anbu, possibly 3 if they were newer members. He watched Naruto's eyes narrow, the excitement built in his blood. He'd been wise to choose this man to save his brother. Of course, he'd been a mere boy last they met, but the decision remained a sound one. Itachi felt Kisami's chakra fade, unable to track it any further. It disappointed him as well. He would have liked a good sparring session. He hadn't had one since his days in Anbu. Anbu sparred to kill. You could very well die in an Anbu sparring session. During his time in the Akatsuki, all but Kisame and Orochimaru shied away from him in the spar arena. Kisame wasn't the best sparring partner, and Orochimaru, well, it was best not to think of him. The only time his limits were truly pushed was during his days in Anbu. The memory shot another unperceivable flash of pain through him. He hadn't wanted to join Anbu. He'd been more than capable of the job, however. Every assassination he completed drained a piece of his soul. It was already torn ragged when he was brought before the elders of the village. Perhaps that was why he was able to perform the deed with Madara's help. He was already numb from the previous missions. He'd been a hair's breadth from becoming a pure killing machine, devoid of emotions. Thoughts of his brother had kept the worst at bay. His cherubic presence a balm to the scarred soul. He suddenly found himself wanting desperately to see Sasuke. He wasn't ready to die here, but at the same time, he wasn't exactly ready to surrender easily. His honor, such as it was, demanded more. Moving almost unperceivable, his kunai was pressed against Uzumaki's throat before any of them could respond. Don't drop your guard, even if you think you know your opponent. The Anbu following Naruto snapped into action, katanas pressing against his body, one even nicking the skin at his neck. A small trickle of blood escaped to wind down his neck. The grip on his kunai remained firm. His eyes locked with those of a deep sapphire blue. Do you understand? Understanding twinkled in those depths as a grin spread across tan features. Itachi continued to stare deep, the red in his eyes fading to black. Good. You trying to teach me or something? Naruto grinned, pushing the kunai from his neck. Or something. Itachi forced a neutral mask over his face as chakra restraints were placed on his wrists. Is that necessary? Asked Naruto, crossing his arms as the Anbu set about securing Itachi. He attacked you. He needs to be restrained. The hawk-masked Anbu stated as he collected the discarded equipment. Itachi fought back, the smirk threatening to pull across his face at the roll of Naruto's eyes. Guys, if he'd wanted to kill us, you would be dead and I would probably still be fighting him. All 4 Anbu paused at the statement, glancing towards Itachi, standing quietly between them. No man is that good. Naruto snorted, you guys must be new. I assure you, we are more than capable of handling a single S-class missing nin, arrogantly stated a bear-masked Anbu. Naruto rolled his eyes again, focusing instead on Itachi. I thought you were dead. I'm sure that was the mutual consensus all around. Itachi slid his eyes towards Naruto. PFF'd. I figured you would have come back before now. What were you here for anyway? You didn't want to hurt Sasuke, did you? Naruto crossed his arms, a hard look crossing his face. He's grown up in more than body, Itachi thought. I didn't believe it was him. Huh. A confused expression crept across his face. Shall we go back to the village? Itachi said, feeling the drain of the blood loss and chakra he'd used. What's with you? Why are you Uchiha emotional black holes? Naruto griped as he escorted him in the direction of the village. Itachi said nothing. He didn't feel like answering the question. He'd played the emotionless monster for so long, some of the tendencies seemed to have taken permanent root. Izumi had been the first person to bring life to his soul since before the massacre of his family. For a moment, he lost himself in the memory. He could still smell the blood congealing on the floors. You're just like Sasuke. He just sits and broods a lot too. Of course, he's mellowed a little since Ryu was born. You have a nephew, by the way, Naruto commented. Hey. Are you listening to me? Not really, Itachi said, turning his eyes forward. Hey, you should show the next Hokage some respect, Naruto groused, crossing his arms. A smile crept along Itachi's lips. This shinobi was rather humorous. Perhaps the reason he got through to Sasuke wasn't such a mystery after all. This was the first instance in a very long time he'd wanted to smile. He'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have that spark of light inside. He was about to open his mouth to speak when the large stone walls surrounding Konoha rose in his vision. He may have just come from the village, but he still felt the crawling dread creeping through him. He'd felt it when he'd arrived with Kisame, but it had been pushed back in his anxiousness to visit his parents' graves. His feet froze where they stood as he looked on the village. His heart began to pound with something akin to dread. Sasuke was alive. Would he finish what he'd failed to do 7 years earlier? Would he want to see him at all? What is it? Naruto asked, pausing when Itachi did. He closed his eyes for a moment before taking a slow breath and walking forward. He wasn't afraid for his life. He couldn't call himself a shinobi if he was. His fear came more from what Sasuke would say to him. Or more importantly, what he would say to Sasuke. Even with the truth, his brother could very well continue to see him as a monster. He wasn't sure if he could bear to see the same hatred in Sasuke's eyes as he'd seen when last they met. "I'm taking you directly to the Hokage," Naruto said, removing the restraints just outside of the gate. "What do you think you are doing?" The hawk-faced Anbu squawked in an indignation, causing Itachi to arch a brow. Just because he wore the mask of a bird didn't mean he had to sound like one. "Get over it. He's not a criminal in this village." Naruto shot an evil look towards the Anbu before taking Itachi's arm. "What did you mean?" he asked, unsure how to respond to a statement such as that. Naruto directed them directly towards Hokage Tower, all the while muttering about how he was pretty damn sure Sakura would have had Kakashi back behind the desk not 5 minutes after he'd departed. "About what?" Itachi didn't reply, his eyes locked on the tower as Naruto urged him through the door. A few shinobi recognized him. He could tell by the way their fingers twitched, as if waiting to see if he would attack so they could reach into their weapon packs. It was to be expected. He was an unshackled S-class missing nin from Leaf. Once upon a time he'd been considered one of the most dangerous men alive. "Hey Sakura-chan," Naruto waved, flagging down Kakashi's assistant with a grin. As that, she gaped for a moment before blinking back her shock and plaque. A more professional mask on her face. "As Kakashi in his office?" he asked, grinning at his former teammate. A furious look washed over the creamy complexion of the woman's face as she slammed the book she was carrying across the blonde's head. "That's Kakashi-sama or Hokage-sama, you dimwit." "God damn it," Naruto yelled, rubbing his head. "Show him the proper respects and I won't have to injure you anymore." The girl glared at Naruto before leading them to the main office of the Hokage. Knocking once, she paused. "You had better be reading scrolls when I open this door," Naruto snickered, causing Itachi to wonder if the conversation revolved around an inside joke he wasn't privy to. Whatever the case, he followed the two inside to see Hatake Kakashi seated behind a desk, his visible Yi lighting up with interest as Itachi walked in to stand beside Naruto. As any trained shinobi, his eyes darted quickly around the office, targeting any weaknesses and exits. Little had changed in the room since the last time he'd stood before the Hokage's desk. When his gaze finally settled on the Hokage, he found an intense look of interest in the man's intense eye. "I brought him back, Kakashi." Naruto's grin spread across his face at the once again dropped honorific. A particularly thick scroll found its way across his skull with a thud. "Ouch, Sakura, stop hitting me over the head with things. Just be glad it wasn't my fist. You moron. Show some respect to your Hokage," she growled, closing the door to leave the three alone. Well, look at what the fox dragged in." Kakashi's grin was completely obvious through his mask. Naruto continued to fume over the injury to his head, glancing at Itachi as he stood quietly before Kakashi. Itachi said nothing. There was really nothing he could say or wanted to for that matter. He would do as he always did, watch for others to make the first move and then plan his counterattack. "And Kisame?" Kakashi turned his gaze to Naruto. "Gone. He threatened to kill us if we moved to go after Kisame." Naruto glanced sideways at Itachi. "Why would you risk yourself for your partner to survive? For that matter, how have you stayed under the radar for so long? I would imagine you would have been seen before now." Kakashi propped his chin on his fist, his eye never leaving Itachi. His voice might have seemed lighthearted, but his eyes spoke a different story. He was very serious. Itachi opened his mouth to reply. He never had the chance as his words were cut off as the office was slammed open. Everyone turned to see Sasuke panting in the doorframe. Itachi. Sasuke's eyes were wide as he took in every inch of the man standing before him. Hello, little brother. He couldn't say he didn't see it coming. Even with Sasuke's substantial speed, he'd seen it coming. Sasuke would never equal his own speed. He could see attacks coming from far away, long before they reached him. Even without his Sharingan activated, he could see enemies' movements. Sasuke's move was no different. He saw the tensing of muscles, the anger in crimson eyes. His brother was fast, but if he so desired, he could have easily dodged the attack. He didn't. His head flew to the side with a crack. Sasuke had added chakra to the punch. A low blow for family, but no less than he deserved. If one was to consider everything that had happened, it was far less and the appropriate punishment for his transgressions. Sasuke. Shouts erupted through the room. Naruto had Sasuke pinned to wall in the Hokage's office. Kakashi was on his feet, blocking Sasuke's access to Itachi. Itachi wasn't so full of himself that he thought for a moment Kakashi was protecting him. It was obvious to him, the Hokage was placing himself between Itachi and his student in the event Itachi retaliated. A noble thought, but unnecessary. Itachi had no intention of attacking his brother. Any and all need for such actions were long past. Sakura, tend to Itachi while I talk to Sasuke outside, ordered Kakashi. Ushering both Naruto and Sasuke from the room. The warmth of healing chakra washed over his face. He hissed at the slight pain in his jaw where the bone was slowly being knitted back together. He found it amusing that the woman really, was keeping her eyes lowered. His infamy still frightened powerful shinobi such as the girl before him. He should probably be flattered at such, yet he only found it another nail in the coffin. You don't need to hide your gaze. I won't use the Sharingan. Truth be told, it still pained him slightly upon activation and extended use. He'd lost the Mangekyo upon his battle with Sasuke. It was perhaps a blessing in disguise as he was nearly blind. He was unsure, but the thick stagnant chakra built up in his eyes from overuse of his Sharingan and the Mangekyo had nearly completely blocked the chakra pathways to his eyes. In his battle with Sasuke, he'd blown out nearly every chakra pathway in his body save for his eyes. A massive outpouring of chakra had flushed the thick build-up from his eyes. His vision had cleared when he'd awoken in the forest, and for the longest time he'd assumed Keiko had repaired his eyes. He never said thank you or mentioned it until one day the three were sitting beneath a tree, Itachi unable to move from another grueling session with Kisame. After the truth was revealed, the three created hypotheses concerning the issue. The above mentioned was the most plausible. I'd be a fool to trust one of the most dangerous missing nins at his word. Sakura pressed a hand over his eyes, forcing his neck to arch as her free hand slid slowly down the column to heal the soft tissue damage from the blow. Your pathways, they feel strange. I suppose they would. I've been nearly crippled for several years, only recently reaching some of my previous stamina. I'll still never reach the height I did with the Mangekyo. His words trailed off as Kakashi returned minus Sasuke and Naruto. How is he? Broken jaw in 2 places. Massive tissue damage along his neck. Probably hurting like hell. Sakura sat back, moving away from Itachi to stand beside the Hokage. Sasuke must have used chakra in that punch. To punch an unarmed man. Tisk, tisk. Kakashi settled behind his desk once more. I wouldn't exactly call Uchiha Itachi unarmed. She was referring to his mastery of genjutsu and ninjutsu. He didn't even need weapons to kill an opponent. His fire jutsu alone could set this office ablaze in moments if he so desired to use it. There is honor, Sakura. Itachi was always one to stick close to his honor, even if it was slightly misled. Kakashi's single eye seemed to stare into Itachi's very being with almost Sharingan intensity. Kakashi, you can leave us, Sakura. The woman seemed to falter for a moment, and Itachi expected her to balk at the order. Every subtle movement in her body seemed to say she would argue the point. As much as was obvious she wanted to stay, she nodded stiffly and exited through the door. Aren't you afraid to be alone with me? Your assistant seemed afraid of my eyes. I'm surprised at you, Itachi. I have 3 Anbu watching from the window and 2 on the other side of the door. If you even move towards me, I'm sure you will have to deal with 5 Anbu. Kakashi chuckled, settling back in his chair, his face going serious. Well, now before we interrupted. Where have you been these last 7 years? Itachi was tempted to argue the statement with the gray-haired Hokage. There were not 5 Anbu, but 7. He was quite flattered that more than a standard number of Anbu were called to be on guard in the event he moved to attack the Hokage. He schooled his face in his standard mask and met the gaze of the Hokage. The man didn't look away. He knew full well what he was capable, yet he met his gaze as an equal. It's a long story. I have time. Kakashi, for all his jokes and humor, was a serious man. Itachi hadn't known him well, but he knew of the tragedy that had changed a serious Junin into a seemingly light-hearted man. It was a mask, a very good one, but a mask all the same. Now he was seeing the true Kakashi hidden away from even his students. Itachi nodded. He wouldn't leave this room until he revealed his secrets. As long as Kisame was protected, he had nothing to hide. His former partner deserved more than the danger of Anbu storming his home. As you wish. Quote, it was a long story, as Itachi had warned. The dictation took nearly 2 hours, with Kakashi interrupting him every few minutes with questions concerning his recovery and the Sharingan. It was during this time Itachi learned Kakashi's eye had lost all vision. Still, the years spent using the weapon would be considered impressive for one of non-Uchiha blood. I see you've had an interesting time in your retirement. Kakashi was obviously smirking beneath his mask. It irked Itachi ever so slightly. I wouldn't call it retirement so much as rehabilitation. So it would seem. Now I'm going to ask you why you stayed. I may have gray hair, but I'm not an old man. You could have easily taken out those 3 Anbu recruits in Naruto. From what my student tells me, you didn't even fight. Kakashi leaned forward, his one visible eye gleaming with interest. I assume you know the truth of the Uchiha clan massacre. Itachi was careful to keep his face a mask, though cracks threatened to shatter it as the memory always did. We were told as much between Madara and Sasuke. For years I have thought Sasuke dead. Kisame and I chose to stay as far away from larger villages as possible. As such, you don't hear much about the goings-on in the hidden villages, even something as important as the life or death of a famed Uchiha. I came on an escort mission, but when I saw Sasuke, when I knew my little brother had somehow survived, I couldn't run. There is much I have done and need to atone for. I may have been a genius, but I was still a child when I was given the order. There were so many other ways I could have gone about things. I'm responsible for Sasuke's suffering and that of those close to him. I suppose I had hoped to receive some sort of punishment for my actions. Itachi released a breath. Not even Kisame had known the depth of Itachi's regret. He suspected, of course, but Itachi had kept such things hidden deep inside so not to taint his makeshift family. I see. Well, as far as the massacre, I can't punish you. It was a direct order and sanctioned by the Hokage's office. Kakashi released his own sigh, leaning back in his plush office chair. Your missing nin status is a bit more tricky. You left the village without sanction for years. You terrorized villagers upon your return, as well as engaged in battle with several Junin, myself included. These are serious crimes and punishable by death. For now, I'm going to have you imprisoned until this can be sorted out. I understand. Almost instantly, all 7 Anbu surround Itachi at the unspoken command of their Hokage. Itachi didn't flinch as they flickered around him, weapons at ready. He'd seen them move, a rustling of leaves outside the open window, a subtle jingling of weapons. He wasn't surprised at his imprisonment. He couldn't be expected to be released after his crimes against the village. Even if the initial fault had been with the village, he had to pay for his crimes. His only hope was to somehow show his remorse to Sasuke. When he'd lain dying in Sasuke's arms, peace had filled him. After surviving all these years, he found himself once again filled with inner turmoil. Itachi stood slowly so not to alarm the guards. His notoriety would work against him in this case, and the last thing he needed was a kunai in the back by a trigger-happy Anbu. Things were strained enough as was. Sasuke is going to want to talk to you once he cools down. Kakashi murmured, I filled with compassion. I'm sure he will. You know you have a nephew now. He's a cute boy. Reminds me more of Naruto than Sasuke. Kakashi walked with Itachi instead of having him lead away. I've met him. He reminds me of Sasuke at that age. The large escort party exited Hokage Tower. The surrounding Anbu drew much attention. The whispers from the villagers they passed on the route towards the high-security Anbu holding cells were barely that. Questioning looks and comments drew more and more villagers to stare at their Hokage personally escorting a prisoner towards Anbu headquarters. A few whispers of his name reached Itachi's ears. He wondered how long it was before the calls for his death were shouted through the streets. "We're here." Kakashi's voice drew his attention from his thoughts. He lifted his gaze towards the massive building encompassing Anbu headquarters. The large building offered housing, offices, and holding cells. Behind would be several massive training grounds in which the members of the elite honed their skills. Many a day was spent in those training grounds. There was nothing quite like Anbu sparring. In the Black Ops, sparring held a much deadlier risk. It wasn't unheard of for sparring partners to injure, maim, or kill each other. Death was rare, but it wasn't unheard of. It's like coming home, isn't it? Itachi smiled at the comment. So much of his life had been spent within the walls. Had it not been for Sasuke, he might have even procured residence here. His brother was the reason for many things he did. Some might say his love of his younger sibling bordered on obsessive. Perhaps they were right. Sasuke had been someone for him to watch over, to protect. When he'd held the tiny infant only hours after his birth, he'd known he would do anything to take care of him. He'd made the vow to himself and their mother. A nudge to his back brought him from his musing once more. It was becoming habit for him to lose himself in the past. He would have to watch himself, lest he anger one of his guards. You understand, we'll Avenue to place you in chakra restraints for now. It's just a precaution. Kakashi motioned for one of the Anbu to approach, fastening the heavy manacles over his wrists. Almost instantly he collapsed against one of the guards. Unlike civilians, a shinobi's body was nearly dependent on chakra to function in even the most basic of tasks. The manacles limited his chakra to the point of being unable to do much more than breath and speak. Even those two actions took effort. The sensation reminded him of several years earlier, wakening to near paralysis. The lack of pain was the only difference. Set him up in a cell. I'll need to return to the office and speak with the council about his return. Kakashi turned, making his way from the holding cells. Rough hands pushed him towards the cell's open door. He braced himself for the fall to the hard concrete floor. Itachi grunted, his wound tearing open slightly from the less than gentle toss into the cell. If he hadn't been struggling to keep his face from showing pain, he might have spoken out at the treatment. Just breathing was difficult, let alone talking. Dragging himself slowly across the concrete floor, he settled himself in an upright position against the wall. He could feel the trickle of blood down his side but lacked the chakra to heal the torn skin. The tear wasn't life-threatening, just a reopening of the wound. What worried him more was the fear of infection. If he was left in the dank cell for more than a day without being treated, there was a very good chance infection could set in. His immune system would be compromised. By the chakra restraints as it fed off his chakra. Chakra restraints were really quite an ingenious invention. They didn't restrain chakra so much as siphon it out, leaving the body weak. Without chakra, he was barely alive. Closing his eyes, there was not much else he could do but attempt to enter a meditative state to deal with the pain in his side. Ooh, I feel lost. Sasuke wasn't one to confess such a thing to any but his wife. In this case, he needed the advice of a friend who had been with him through the darkest part in his life. If not for Naruto, Sasuke would have destroyed himself and most likely a large portion, if not all, of Konoha. What you need is ramen. A grin split Naruto's face, making Sasuke wonder if he should slap his friend or give in to the less than subtle hint. Ramen isn't the cure-all, Sasuke commented, turning down the street to lead towards Ichiraku Ramen. Sure it is. A ramen counter is the best place to have a conversation. When your stomach's full, it's easier to talk. Things don't seem so bad. Naruto's face took on an introspective look, making Sasuke wonder just what his friend was thinking. I wonder how anyone could have a conversation with you with all the slurping. Sasuke ducked beneath the awning, taking a place on at the nearly empty bar. I'll have you know, Uruka-sensei and I had great conversations at this counter. It always amazed Sasuke how Naruto could speak so easily of their former academy instructor. Madara had gone mad when Sasuke had switched sides, Naruto having reached into his very soul, aided by the power of the nine-tailed Kyuubi. In a burst of light, Sasuke's sanity had been restored. Madara hadn't taken it well, seeing his control over Sasuke vanquished. Sasuke and Naruto, both nearly drained of chakra, had to sit back and watch as their friends and fellow shinobi attacked the monster known as Madara. In a last-ditch effort, Yumino Iruka had taken a fatal blow so that he could get under Madara's guard. As unheard of for an Uchiha with Sharingan eyes to be distracted. Iruka, a mere chunin, bound the nearly unstoppable Uchiha Madara long enough for others to move in for the kill. Madara wasn't so easy to kill. It had taken a final dual attack of Sasuke's Chidori and Naruto's ultimate Sage Rasengan to deal the killing blow. Iruka had died in Naruto's arms minutes later. Sasuke was sure he'd never seen Naruto cry like that. Even now, Naruto continued to speak fondly of his teacher. He wasn't sure how he could stand to frequent places that brought back the memories of their old sensei. Naruto Senpai replied that he'd done the same for Sasuke during the long years they'd been apart during his less than sane days with Orochimaru and then with the Akatsuki. He said when memories are all one has, they should treasure them. It was that day he'd given the order to destroy the former Uchiha district, building the memorial gardens in its place. So, what's got you all broody? Is it Itachi? Are you worried about him or for him? Naruto began slurping down the fragrant miso ramen while waiting for an answer. Sasuke shook his head, taking a bite of his own meal. I'm not sure what I feel. When I thought him dead, I had to come to terms with never being able to say the things I wanted to him. I'm not like Kakashi, I can't speak to a stone. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment. Now you have a second chance to talk with him. I'm not sure what I would say. I'm not sure he would even want to talk with me. I tried to kill him. I was willing to kill him. He wanted to die. He tried to kill you. I think he was pretty fucked up in the head. His village asked him to kill his entire clan. Even a genius would lose sight of his priorities. He was grieving for his family and seeing you. I'm sure his sanity broke. His plan was faulty, but he did it for you. Naruto's long fingers played with the rim of his teacup. I can respect risking everything for the ones we love. Don't say that, Sasuke whispered, lowering his eyes. I didn't ask to be a hero of this village and he sought to make me one all the same. I'd say that plan backfired a little, Naruto chuckled. Sasuke reached over to slap his friend's head. Moron. Bastard. If you were this fucked up, go see him. Geez, I'm not your mother. Decide for yourself. If you forgave him while you thought he was dead, go tell him. It's no different with him alive. You can actually know he hears your forgiveness now. Naruto rolled his eyes as if to say Sasuke was an idiot and things truly were that simple. I can't. I'm still getting used to his being alive. My niece-san. I never thought he would survive. It took so long to release the guilt. After he died, the guilt bled into the anger already seething inside me. It added fuel to the fire. Naruto. I'm afraid to see him. Sasuke flushed at the statement. It was shameful to say he was afraid of something. Naruto. I'm worried about him but I'm too afraid to face him, myself. Naruto huffed a breath. And you call me a moron. Fine, if it will make you feel any better I'll go check on him. I'm a member of Anbu after all. I've got a short mission but I'll check on him tonight before I leave headquarters. Will that make you happy? Thanks. Sasuke ran his hand through his hair, mussing the already spiky locks. That's what friends are for. Now if you don't mind, I have to go home and change before heading out. I'm sure he's fine. He's an Uchiha and made of pretty damn sturdy stock, especially if he's anything like you. I've never met anyone who could keep up with me like you. Naruto pushed aside his bowl and tossed a few coins on the counter to cover both the meals. How could the class moron ever think to compare to the class genius? Sasuke arched a brow. Yeah, takes real genius to go learn jutsus from a man with a tongue long enough to fuck himself. Sasuke's brow twitched a little. Orochimaru wasn't that bad. Bullshit. It's a wonder you escaped with your virginity. Or did you? You do have that snake inside you somewhere, I wonder where. Naruto's teeth flashed before dodging the deadly toss of a kunai. The metal lodged in the wooden frame of the ramen shop. Hey you kids, stop that or I'll call the guard. You're scaring away the customers. The old man, face wrinkled from long days spent toiling over vats of steaming ramen, rushed to the counter, ladle lifted in annoyance. Sorry, old man. Naruto waved and ducked beneath the awning. I'll see you, Sasuke. That kid has a lot of spunk. Tsuki smiled at Naruto's disappearing form. He's not a kid anymore, Sasuke mused, sipping the broth from his ramen. Tsuki chuckled, a loud gaffing sound. All you youngsters are still kids to me. Sasuke smiled. Some things never changed. It was probably shameful to ask Naruto to check on his brother. He just couldn't bear to see him. He'd nearly lost it in Kakashi's office. His body had reacted before his mind could do more than process the information. He knew without the least bit of doubt, he would react badly seeing him caged in the Anbu holding cell. He was weak, just as his brother had told him all those years ago. Itachi might have meant those words only to incite him to grow stronger, but Sasuke knew the truth. He was weak. Naruto released the limp body from his hands to fall in a crumpled mass inside the makeshift hideout. He knew these men were rapists and murderers. He knew they deserved the death he'd meted out to them. It didn't make his job any easier. They weren't even given the chance to fight back. Stealth had been ingrained into him since joining Anbu. The antics of his days as a genin were long gone, making him all the more deadly. He retained his natural power, yet now his enemies would never see him coming. His breath wasn't even broken, puffing out against the wooden mask hiding his features from his victims. Even the face of their killer was hidden. All they knew was an Anbu had taken their life. It was all they were allowed. Taking a dirty bit of sheet from the bed, he wiped the blood from his standard-issue katana. He forced himself to use the blade, honing his skills. It was by far his weakest skill. He could in no way measure up to the abilities of Sasuke, though his friend coached him regularly. He frowned. Had it really been 2 days? Blue eyes blinked several times. It had taken longer than he'd thought to track down the bandits. They'd been quite sneaky, leaving false trails in various directions, good ones too. Time to head back. Sasuke had probably gotten tired of waiting for Naruto visit Itachi and done it himself. Bounding through the trees, Naruto made his way back to the village. The bandits had made their home a half a day's journey from Konoha. Lack of sleep and decent food had Naruto in a particularly ill mood as he handed off his report to one of the guards at Anbu headquarters. Any mission he performed while in Anbu uniform was immediately assigned the classified seal. Only the Hokage and the head of Anbu were granted unlimited access to those files. Special sanction had to be given to any others who viewed them. His stomach grumbled louder with each passing moment. He wanted a bath, food, and sleep in that order. He'd make Sasuke pay for delaying his rest the next time they sparred. He'd glance in the cell, see Itachi sitting happily while Kakashi and the council decided what to do with him, then go home for food, bath and rest. The air shifted a little, growing colder and slightly stale. He always hated the holding area. To any shinobi, it was probably hell. Being caged, locked away from fresh air and sunlight was torture enough without having to bring in Ibiki or one of the other interrogation experts. Itachi was probably pacing his cell like a madman by now. Naruto's shoulders slumped a little, making his way toward the high-security block of cells. The Anbu assigned to Itachi's cell shifted bored eyes his way and lifted a hand half-heartedly. Yo, you're new. After being in Anbu for certain amounts of time, it became easy to identify shinobi even when wearing their issued masks. This was obviously one of the newer recruits. UARD duty was only assigned to rookies and as punishment. Even guarding high-security prisoners was a less than desirable assignment. This kid, probably no older than 17 or 18, looked ready to fall flat on his face with boredom. Naruto really couldn't blame him. There was no worse fate than guard duty with the exception of latrine duty. I've only been in Anbu about a month. Kid was too out of it to realize he was talking to one of the highest-ranked Anbu under the head, not that Naruto wanted to be fawned over. He hated it almost as much as Sasuke, now understanding torture his friend had endured during their youth. Just stick it out. You'll be murdering children before you know it. Naruto couldn't hide the distaste from his tone. There was no worse mission or an Anbu than to be assigned an assassination of children. Naruto had only been given that sort of assignment once. He still had nightmares. He had a feeling Kakashi had something to do with the lack of such missions finding their way to him after that. How's the prisoner? The guard shrugged. He doesn't do much. He just sits there against the wall. He's stopped eating too. My superior said it wasn't uncommon for people in chakra restraints to refuse food. Naruto felt himself go cold. There was barely any light shining into the small cell. If his eyes weren't trained to adjust quickly to dark spaces, he might not have noticed Itachi's slumped form against the wall. He could have been sleeping. The pale skin on his face caught the light, reflecting through the small window in the cell. Long locks of thick hair framed his face and thick sooty lashes lay softly against high cheekbones. The older Uchiha was beautiful. Where Sasuke's face had taken on a harsh sharp cut as he aged, Itachi's retained the soft roundness. It wasn't exactly feminine, but wasn't glaringly masculine either. A perfect blend. Has he spoken? Not since my shift began. He just sits there, the Anbu answered. Something wasn't right. Open the door. No fucking way. I'll be demoted. Or worse, punished. The Anbu guard had barely gotten the words from his mouth before he found himself flat against the cold stone. A standard issue kunai pressed warningly to his jugular. Please, open the door or I'll kill you and do it myself. Naruto's eyes bled crimson. It was a throwback effect from the Kyuubi's presence in him. The tailed beast was firmly sealed inside, but some effects of their joining continued to manifest during times of great stress or anger. Despite his eyes' red glow, Naruto was in full control. Kyuubi no Kitsune no longer held any control over him. The guard's hands shook, performing the appropriate signs and pressing his palms to the door. The latch lifted with a loud whining creak. Naruto didn't wait for the guard to move into the cell. He lunged across the tiny expanse of cell and knew immediately something was wrong. He supposed he could thank the Kyuubi for his keen sense of smell. It was nowhere near that of the Inuzuka clan, but it was much more sensitive than the average shinobi. Naruto crouched beside Itachi. He smelled blood and infection. What the fuck? Itachi. The sooty lashes fluttered before lifting. Pain and fever hooded the dark orbs. Naruto pulled back the black shirt, almost gagging at the smell. Red-tinged pus oozed from the ripped injury. Red rises lined the jagged wound. A sure sign of infection. You should have checked him, you moron. Rage enveloped Naruto, almost to such a point, he nearly lost control of his senses. Such an event hadn't happened in years. I didn't know he was sick. The Anbu backed himself up against the wall, eyes darting fearfully behind his wooden mask. You should have known. Even I noticed something wasn't right. Take the cuffs off. I'm taking him where I know he'll get treated, Naruto growled. I can't. Take them off. It was obvious the guard was more frightened of Naruto in that moment than any possible repercussions from his superiors. It worked to Naruto's advantage. You're going to be all right, Itachi. The moment the manacles fell from his wrists, Itachi's heavy breathing evened out, if only slightly. It was enough to stabilize him. Naruto reached into his medpack, pressing a bandage over the seeping wound. He didn't dare attempt to close it. Locking the infection in the body was worse than letting it seep from an open wound, and his medic skills were limited to basic first aid. Itachi needed a full-fledged medic nin for this wound. Lifting Itachi's frame on his back, he winced at how light he felt. Itachi, and most Uchiha, tended to be smaller framed and leanly muscled. Their skills lay in genjutsu. Small lean frames allowed them quick movements and lightning fast reflexes. This WL edge didn't prevent Naruto from cringing at just how small Itachi was. I suggest you report this to your superior. And while you're at it, tell the fucking Hokage that I'm going to beat the shit out of him when I see him. Naruto disappeared in a flash of movement reminiscent of his father's famous jutsu in which he earned the name Yellow Flash. He didn't dare bring Itachi to the hospital or even to Sakura. Instead, he opted to run towards a large house situated behind a stone fence. Sasuke! Naruto screamed, running into the yard. Naruto! Miko opened the door in time for Naruto rush past. Oh, gods! Sasuke rushed in from the garden, gaping at his brother's limp form thrown over Naruto's shoulders. Itachi. He's really sick, Sasuke. I wasn't sure where else I could take him that he'd be safe for me to go find Ba-chan. Naruto was panting. The fast speed he'd used to get to Sasuke had wiped what little energy he had left. Already he'd begun tapping into the Kyuubi's energy just to remain standing. In the spare bedroom, Miko finally recovered from her shock and led Naruto through the house, Sasuke following silently behind them. What happened, Naruto? Sasuke asked quietly, his face going pale at the shallow breathing coming from his brother's chest. Fuck if I know. I just got back from my mission and went to check on him like you asked. He was half dead in his cell. With an idiot guard thinking he was just sleeping. Naruto bent over at the waist, attempting to rally the strength to locate Tsunade. Should I go for Sakura? Sasuke moved to slip his sandals on his feet. No, I'm going for Ba-chan. She's still in town since the festival starts tomorrow and we all know the gambling will keep her in town. Naruto exited the front door. Sorry about your floor. Sasuke turned to glance in the direction Naruto nodded. Tracks of dirt and mud made a path into the house as Naruto hadn't had the chance to remove his sandals. Don't worry about it. Naruto nodded, turned, and raced down the street towards an older but well-maintained estate house. The first Hokage's home had fallen into ruin, only finally being brought back to life when Tsunade returned to the village to assume the role of Hokage. Ba-chan. Silence. Figures the old hag would be out in the bars already. Turning from door, he moved quickly towards the bar district. There dozens of bars bu. Naruto wasn't distracted by the lit-up signs, bright in the evening dusk. He didn't need to look long for his destination. He knew the one Tsunade frequented. Pushing open the door of one of the more seedy bars, Naruto scanned the interior. Light blonde hair shone dull beneath the overhead light. Ba-chan. Beautiful features turned to face him. I told you not to call me that. It's the only way to get your attention sometimes. Grumbled Naruto. Take a seat, brat. We were about to start another round. Tsunade reached for her cup of sake, lifting it to her lips only to be stopped by Naruto. What do you think you're doing? Ba-chan. We need you to heal someone. It can't wait. Tsunade snorted. Go get Sakura or some other healer. I'm retired. Please, Tsunade-sama. He dropped the familiarity. This drew her attention more than the use of his affectionate term for her. A blonde brow lifted at Naruto's plea. Naruto. Tsunade set aside her drink. Fine, let's go. This had better be good. It's Uchiha Itachi. He'll die without you. From the shock working across her face, she obviously hadn't heard the rumors working their way through the village. When drinking and gambling, those were the only things she focused on, just as when she healed. Her mind focused on the task at hand and nothing else. Take me to him. Naruto and Tsunade strode into the Uchiha household to find Sasuke having drawn his katana and facing off against at least 5 Anbu while Kakashi attempted to unsuccessfully defuse the situation. No, you had your chance and nearly killed him. No one is getting anywhere near him. Sasuke's eyes held remnants of the madness having held him in its grasp years before. Upon seeing Kakashi, Naruto's vision went red. He lunged at his Hokage, uncaring of the Anbu in the room. His fist plowed into the masked cheek. Bastard, if you wanted to kill him, do it honorably instead of sticking him in a cell to rot. Enough, Tsunade yelled, obviously tired of watching the testosterone fly. Naruto, shut up. Kakashi, sit down. Sasuke, show me to your brother and the rest of you get out of this house. I may not be an active Hokage any longer but you will obey me. Or I will beat the shit out of all of you. The room emptied almost immediately. Miko, who'd been standing quietly in the corner with her son, gaped openly at the seemingly larger-than-life woman before her. She'd only met the woman a few times but had never seen her in action until now. Her tone even impressed Naruto. Naruto slumped on a sofa, exhausted, hungry, and still badly in need of a bath. He glared as Kakashi took the seat across from him. You left him to die. Kakashi shook his head, holding up a placating hand. I didn't know he was sick. The guards were under specific orders not to bother him. With chakra restraints, he wasn't expected to get up and move around. Sitting is about all a person can do. There was no reason. No reason. You son of a bitch. He shouldn't have been in chakra restraints. You knew he wasn't a risk. He wanted to be brought here. Naruto couldn't decide if Kakashi was being ignorant or just stupid. Naruto, I know things have been strained with us. Stop. I'm not going there with you, Kakashi. Every day you rub in your position. Every day I have to sit and know that you chose Sakura over me. Naruto clenched his fists. I was happy when you were given the title of Hokage. I knew you would make a great leader. You can't imagine how hurt I was to find you fucking one of my best friends on your desk. I wonder how many times you fucked Sakura and came home to fuck me. You know it wasn't like that. It just happened. Kakashi reached a hand towards Naruto, forcing him to move away. Naruto nodded, standing and moving away from where Kakashi sat. And I just happened to stop loving you. You lost my respect, Kakashi. With those words, Naruto turned and exited the house. He'd done all he could for Itachi. It was in Tsunade's hands now. He was long overdue for that shower, food, and sleep. An ache rushed his chest, spreading with each step he made towards the small apartment he owned. Sleep first. Sleep would help him forget. There was a thick haze enveloping his head. He hadn't felt this bad since the morning he'd woken up after his battle with Sasuke. The only difference being the bed beneath him was a considerably soft mattress than the few blankets Kisame had used as bedding. His eyes cracked open and, for a moment, his heart stopped at the darkness coating the room. It had been a terrifying fear enveloping him. Since before he'd fought Sasuke waking up blind. As his eyes adjusted, his heart's pounding staccato eased. It was his greatest fear after Sasuke's safety. So, you're awake. Itachi's eyes shot toward the corner and the woman he hadn't noticed until she spoke. He should have sensed her the moment he was conscious. Even hazy from sickness, he should have noticed her. A slender hand flicked the light switch beside her chair, revealing her identity, the former 5th Hokage Tsunade. His body tensed instinctively. After so many years as a missing nin, it was a hard thing not to do. Tsunade-sama. His voice cracked as he spoke. You always were more polite than your brat of a brother. Tsunade stood from her chair, settling beside him on the bed as if he was just another patient. It was then Itachi noticed the lack of chakra restraints. His chakra felt a bit sluggish but not completely gone, as it had in the prison. The lack of hard stone floors was a change as well, a very welcome change. Itachi's tongue darted out to swipe at the cracked skin, impairing his speech, grateful when Tsunade pressed a glass of water to his lips. Cool liquid splashed in his mouth and down his throat. It was probably the best thing he'd put in his mouth in years, or it felt that way. Finally able to speak, he asked, "Where am I?" "In your brother's house. You were nearly dead when I finally got here. You seem to like skirting that particular area, don't you?" Tsunade set the glass on the bedside table with a thunk. "That cut in your side you declined to have treated split open, and with your chakra being suppressed, infection set in. Sasuke took me." Itachi's eyes widened at the implication. "Actually, from what I understand, Naruto forced the Anbu guard to open your cell and took you from there himself. Those idiots in Anbu are hearing it from me later. Things like that didn't happen while I was Hokage." Tsunade scowled in the general direction of Anbu headquarters. "Yes, it did. Danzo just kept it from reaching your ears," Itachi commented. The statement earned him a particularly dark glare. Deny it though she might, it didn't make the words any less true. Before his death, Danzo had kept many things from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Hokages. Waving her hand, she settled back in her chair. "Never mind, I'm more interested in what possessed you to come back after so long." A twist of fate. A thin blonde brow arched. "That seems to happen a lot around here in the last few years." Itachi silently agreed with her. The last few years had been a series of fate and luck for him. And now he wasn't sure where it would take him and if he would ever be allowed the chance to make amends for what he'd done, what he'd allowed to happen due to miscalculations on his part. At the time, all his plans had seemed appropriate. It was a funny thing, the human spirit. It ignored all plans and followed its own course, despite the most stringent direction. "I healed you, but I would suggest you remain in bed for a couple of days. You're still weak and your chakra is far too low to be moving about. That wound in your side was pretty bad. I would expect more from an elite shinobi." Tsunade moved to leave the room. Pausing at the door, "I'd give your thanks to Naruto. If he'd have waited much longer, we would be cremating your ass." With those words she closed the door, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He'd never given much thought to Naruto Uzumaki other than as his failsafe for Sasuke's salvation. He'd known during his time with the Akatsuki that he needed to protect the boy from them while still maintaining his personal objectives, choosing only to see him as the carrier of the fox demon and not as a person. Until the day he'd spoken with Naruto face to face, he'd never really understood what a remarkable person he was. Now he owed his life to the boy. No, too much time had passed. He was no longer a boy, but a man. The door creaked open, shooting light across the foot of the bed in the semi-dark room and breaking him from his thoughts. Expecting to see the Hokage or perhaps Anbu guards, Itachi was surprised to witness a small miniature version of Sasuke creep into the room. It was almost enduring how little eyes darted back and forth, searching the shadows for hidden enemies before deeming it safe enough to enter with less caution. The floorboards creaked beneath socked feet, a sign of his lack of training. Itachi could remember the days spent practicing moving through a room silently. If he'd truly known what the life of a shinobi entailed, the blood, assassinations, and thievery, would he have been so anxious to please his father and clan? The dark eyes staring into his bespoke the innocence resting inside. "You look different with no mask. That man with the mask make Naruto mad. I don't like masks. Everyone wears masks." Ryu shook his head. "Daddy Don, you don't know more. The innocence of youth. How long would it be before this boy stood surrounded by dead enemies, their blood coating his hands? Sometimes you can't see the mask. Indivisible." Dark eyes widened, obviously tossing the thought around in his head. "Invisible," Itachi corrected, wincing in an attempt move to a sitting position. The former Hokage hadn't lied when she'd said he would need to rest. His side ached, but at least the throbbing pain was gone. "You look like Daddy except the hair." Ryu pulled himself on the bed to sit at Itachi's hip. "Naruto says Daddy's hair looks like a duck's ass." Ryu's voice lowered at the comment. "Don't tell Mama I said that." The incredulity of the conversation, mostly one-sided on Ryu's part, amazed Itachi. He'd never given thought to it, but Sasuke's hair did resemble the back end of a duck. The mental image brought him much amusement. Thankfully he'd outgrown the spiky hair tendency the men in his family dealt with. "Are you really my uncle? Like Naruto? I like you. I don't mind if you're my uncle." Ryu kept chattering in the cheerful childlike manner Itachi had become accustomed to during their long trip to Konoha. "Daddy says your name's Tachi. Can I call you Uncle Tachi?" Ryu. Sasuke stood in the doorway looking at his young son with an exasperated expression only a father could have. Itachi was fairly certain Miko possessed a similar expression. "Busted," Ryu grumbled. "Wanna stay with Uncle Tachi?" Ryu. "Itachi and I need to talk." "Okay, you can talk." The less than subtle hint was completely lost on the child, his still chubby arms wrapped tightly around Itachi's midriff. "Alone?" Itachi expected the boy to dig his proverbial heels in. The pink lower lip poked out and a look of almost defiance crossed the child's pale features before he heaved a deep sigh, obviously knowing he was fighting losing battle and not liking it one bit. Ryu slid from the bed, padding across the floor in dejection. "Bye-bye, Uncle Tachi." Ryu shoved his hands in his pockets, a look of true Uchiha brooding took over his face as he walked past his father. If looks could kill, the one he shot Sasuke in passing would have dropped the man in an instant. With the boy gone, Sasuke slid the door closed with a faint snap. Minutes seemed like hours, ticking by while similar obsidian eyes measured the other. It was almost embarrassing for Itachi to present such a weakened form to his brother. Even before, with his eyes nearly gone, he'd never let Sasuke see just how weak he really was. "Tsunade-sama said you'll be fine." Itachi couldn't stop the small chuckle from passing his lips. "Until my execution. You won't be executed. The Hokage knows my stance on the matter." Sasuke's eyes grew particularly angry. "The Hokage answers to the people." A small twitch of lips was the only sign of his amusement. He knew full well the strength of the Hokage. His and Sasuke's lives were a direct result of it. Of course, he couldn't blame the Sandaime for what was truly out of his hands. The Uchiha, in their arrogance, had forced the hand of the council. Perhaps had there been more time, another solution could have been reached. As it was, he was left with only what-ifs. Even now, he could still smell the death of that night. It never left him. I don't care. You aren't dying. Sasuke crossed his arms, his stance a very definition of defiance. Your tone has certainly changed since that day. Fucking stop it right now. Sasuke shot across the room, fisting his hand in the plain yukata covering Itachi's chest and pulling him up so their faces were inches apart. You were just doing that to get a rise from me. Apparently it's working. Itachi smirked cockily in his brother's face. Asshole. Sasuke lowered Itachi back to the bed, the obvious shaking in his hands preventing him from maintaining his hold. There's a lot needing to be said, Itachi whispered, suddenly feeling very tired. Why did you stay away? I was fucked up for a long time, thinking I'd killed you knowing I'd killed you without knowing the truth. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Sasuke pulled away, running hands through mussed hair. At the time, it was the only thing I could think to do. I just didn't think you would take the route you did. Itachi chuckled, lifting a hand to push his bangs behind an ear. Orochimaru. Itachi hummed in acknowledgement. Apparently, I was the foolish one to think I could control you with perfect precision. I saw you wavering. I saw you the gradual way you began to let go of your anger and need to avenge what had been done. It wasn't something I had expected you to relinquish so easily. Sasuke slumped in the nearest chair. Naruto has that effect on people. Even back then when he was more annoying than any other creature on this planet. Itachi nodded. I should have left it be. I should have let you be. But I wanted to be punished. I wanted you to punish me, but I've never been one to throw a fight, so I deviated from my original plans. Itachi began laughing at the complete insanity of the events long past but still painful. His hands lifted to his face, covering it. The laughter hurt his aching side. It was all he could do when faced with the incredulity of his life. It hurt. Itachi. I'm a monster who created a monster. My carefully made plans were falling apart around me. You were becoming content and losing the hate I so carefully instilled in you. I acted quickly, hoping only to renew that hate. Instead, I handed you wrapped in about Orochimaru. Itachi spat the name like poison on his tongue. He could still feel the internal revulsion Orochimaru caused in him. To think Sasuke had spent so much time in his presence was an unthinkable thought. Sasuke shook his head vehemently. No, I made my own choices. Sasuke. Itachi's hands clenched in the sheets covering him. We both know I forced your hand. Silence spread thickly between them. It was like a wall erected between them. After so many years, neither could remember the feeling of being brothers. Your son, he reminds me of you. God, I hope not, chuckled Sasuke. Once more the ice was broken between them. It was a soothing relief, the wall, not necessarily crumbling, but instead parting. Kisame accused me of holding affections towards your wife. Sasuke's eyes darkened for a moment, making Itachi chuckle at just how easily his brother could be riled. I'm afraid I had to set him straight. She reminds me too much of mother. The words relaxed Sasuke, a small smile gracing his face. She saved me in a lot of ways. I was so angry, even after Naruto opened my eyes. She took all my bullshit. She told me to stop being a boy and act like a man. Can you believe that? Itachi shook his head, laughter threatening to bubble up from his chest. It sounds as if she has you good and truly by the balls. Hey, Sasuke's lips pouted, much as they had years before while begging Itachi to train him. Forgive me, Sasuke. You make it too easy. Itachi chuckled a bit, his heart feeling lighter. The jovial tone of the conversation didn't last. Sasuke's face became serious, his hand lifting to touch the closed lids of his eyes. Ni-san, what did Madara do to my eyes? Of all the possible questions, it was one he couldn't hope to answer. After stabilizing the Akatsuki, Madara had taken to the shadows once more, only pain having access to him. By the time Madara resumed power, Itachi had already diverted his attention from the Akatsuki in favor of planning his confrontation with Sasuke. Linking his fingers on his abdomen, Itachi chose his words carefully. Madara, he was involved in experimentation. I think it's one reasons he favored Orochimaru for a time. He was less than honorable with our clan on that night. He thought back to the night. He remembered the chill in the air. Madara had refused to strike the first blow. Perhaps it had been a test, to see if Itachi would follow through. In retrospect, the likelihood of it being a test was considerable. The moment his blade sliced through warm flesh, Madara had joined the silent execution. In their arrogance, the Uchiha never saw the attack. Itachi's eyes flared open, his Sharingan spinning in a dizzying whirl. He took eyes, Sasuke. He could practically taste Sasuke's shock and dismay. Mother, father, no, he knew better than that. Itachi swallowed the lump having gathered in his throat. If he'd touched them, I would have killed him where he stood. Could you have done that? Defeated him? Asked Sasuke. I don't know. Sasuke quivered slightly in anger. What did he do with them? That was the question, wasn't it? At the time, Itachi had been too lost in his own grief mindlessly following Madara's lead. Only afterward did his mind clear. He'd never asked why the man took them. Hey, perhaps it was that small inkling of fear of what Madara would say. Why didn't he fix yours? I know you were half blind by the time we met. I wasn't his ultimate goal. I was loyal to my home. He was careful. All my assignments led me away from the village. I've often wondered if he sent Orochimaru in your direction. A quick glance to Sasuke showed his brother paler than usual. Sasuke frowned, staring deeply into Itachi's slowly darkening eyes. But I thought I needed the eyes of someone possessing the Mangekyo Sharingan. Don't be foolish, Sasuke. Just because no one said they had it, didn't mean they didn't. I can't be certain. It was so long ago and at the time, I wasn't the most alert. There could have been others. There are other ways to obtain the Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi sighed deeply. From what I've gleaned, the other methods leave the Mangekyo unstable until it is trained appropriately. I'm sure father and the clan elders didn't want the village catching wind such a powerful technique being developed. I doubt any outside of father and the elders knew who possessed it and who didn't. For so long I thought he'd used your eyes. Every time I looked in the mirror, I could almost see you staring back at me. Fuck. Sasuke buried his face in his hands. I think he thought he couldn't use my eyes. Perhaps. Itachi tilted his head, considering. He'd considered the reasons why Madara had left him during his bedridden days and it was the only explanation he could come to. He thought you blinded yourself. Itachi nodded. He thought I blew out my eyes, when in fact, I saved them. Forcing so much chakra through them cleared the build-up, restoring all but the Mangekyo which I passed to you. Sasuke. Both men glanced to see Miko standing serenely in the doorway. You should let Itachi-san rest. You've been talking for almost an hour. Itachi was surprised at how tired he felt, and how happy. Talking with Sasuke, no longer fighting it eased the ache in his heart that hadn't left for nearly 15 years. He didn't want his brother to leave, exhausted or no. This moment was too precious to him to lose. I'm fine, he lied. Miko smiled, stepping in the room, placing a firm hand on his chest. And forcing him down to the bed. Liar. Just like your brother. You should have seen him when he was a child. I can't tell you the number of spankings he received for attempting to lie to mother. He was a terrible liar. Itachi smiled fondly at the memory. He hasn't gotten any better. She shooed Sasuke reluctantly from the room and turned to where Itachi lay. Sleep well, Itachi-san. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep my son from you. The slid shut with a click. He closed his eyes and for the first time in what seemed like ages, he wasn't afraid to sleep. He didn't fear death but the ghosts that haunted his memories. Tonight, though, promised to be free of the nightmares. Ooh, Naruto stretched, his eyes lazily wandering over the smooth bedroom ceiling. The day before had been unbelievably difficult, in more ways than one. He hadn't even bothered with food or a bath but simply fell across his double bed. Now, lying here, his body reminded his that he had chose to skip a meal in favor of sleep. It hadn't helped that he'd had to deal with seeing Kakashi looking so calm seated in Sasuke's living room. Most days he could push aside the hurt and anger, favoring disinterest. Last night, with exhaustion and hunger beating at him, he'd cracked slightly beneath the strain. It had been over a year, yet he still wanted to scream out at the injustice. His trust in Kakashi and Sakura had been so complete, he never in his wildest dreams would have imagined what transpired between them had he not seen it with his own eyes. Closing his eyes, his mind wandered back to that day. He's been on a long mission. 3 months. It shouldn't have run that long, but securing the objective took much longer than anticipated. When he'd finally made it back to the village, he'd run full steam towards Hokage Tower. His need to see Kakashi to kiss him had overridden any other desire. Exhausted, hungry, and smelling of things better left unsaid, he stepped into the Hokage's outer office. It wasn't unusual for Sakura to not be at her desk. She tended to stay busy between her rounds at the hospital and being the assistant to the Hokage. So excited to see Kakashi again, he ignored the Anbu who tried to stop him as he pushed through the doors to the inner office. That was the moment time had stopped. Sakura, someone he'd always thought of as a friend, was sprawled over the desk. Skirt around her waist and legs wrapped around Kakashi. Had he not been in such a state of shock, he might have blown up raging madly at Kakashi. Instead, the shock transformed quickly to hurt. A few quick hand signs and he was at Sasuke's door. His friend, having also been away on the mission, answered the door with a particularly pissed off look until he saw Naruto's face. The next few weeks were a blur. With the help of Sasuke and Miko, he'd acquired a new apartment. He refused to talk with Kakashi or Sakura. It was Sasuke who collected Naruto's things from the space he'd shared with Kakashi. Gradually the hurt turned to anger and then to indifference. Sakura had come to him contrite, and while he sensed her regret was genuine, their friendship had lost something that could never be returned. They continued to bicker and joke, but something was gone from their friendship. Kakashi had come to him as well, seeking forgiveness. That had been a lot harder to swallow. Kakashi had always been someone he respected. When their relationship had been in its infancy, he'd thought he had found the person he wanted to spend his life with. How bitter those words had tasted. When they were still together, Naruto had always been respectful in public. It was his respect for Kakashi and for the role he played for the village. After witnessing him and Sakura together, he'd dropped any and all honorifics from Kakashi's name unless prompted. Kakashi tried to lighten things, making a game of forcing honorifics from Naruto. Perhaps he was trying to find a way back into Naruto's graces. It wasn't working. Every sama he uttered only drove another crack into the large canyon separating him from Kakashi. Kakashi's playfulness was a sign of his hope to rebuild at least some facet of their relationship. Maybe someday he would be a big enough man to tell Kakashi he'd forgiven him. He just found the words unable to be spoken. He might have forgiven Kakashi for his infidelity, but he would never have the desire to be more than a friend. That ship had sailed never to return again. Kakashi might have lost Naruto's respect, but never say he held anything the highest respect for the office of Hokage. He followed through with every mission, big or small. He gave his reports and put in his time on watch. He loved this village and everyone in it. The only difference was he no longer respected Kakashi the man as he once had. Fuck. He scrubbed at his eyes, wiping away the thick build-up. He still had to eat and shower before heading over to Sasuke's to see how things went with Itachi. A quick breakfast of cup ramen and a particularly large glass of milk followed by a steaming shower, Naruto felt a million times better. He was still a bit edgy, not uncommon feeling after an assassination mission. Maybe after checking on Itachi, he could goad Sasuke into a spar to burn off the remainder of his edginess. Yo Sasuke bastard, you awake, Naruto yelled, strolling lazily around the house towards the garden in back. Considering it's nearly lunchtime, I would hope so. Sasuke lowered his sword, having been performing his daily katas and sending Naruto a pointed look. Naruto's eyes went wide at the feeling of pure untainted malice rolling from Sasuke in literal waves. Bright, very crimson eyes glared at him, making even Naruto fear for his life. I didn't know he was there, Sasuke. I swear on all that is holy. He'd wanted to goad Sasuke into a spar. He hadn't intended on making him so pissed off he actually tried to kill him. Naruto dodged, quick to roll from the downward slash of Sasuke's katana. Fuck Sasuke. I said I was sorry. Fuck daddy. He said he was sorry. Ryu yelled, trying to run to protect his uncle, only to be snatched up by his mother. Ah, I wanted to pee way with Daddy and Naruto. Daddy and Naruto will play with you later. They need to burn off some steam and we need to have a talk about certain words. Miko shook her head at the barely visible movement of Sasuke and Naruto. Shit Sasuke, ease up. Naruto ran up the side of the wall surrounding the house just moments before a Chidori-laced katana buried itself in the stone. He'd wanted to spar but not when his life was on the line. Sasuke's temper was particularly potent. He must have spoken with his brother, something Naruto wanted to do as well. Sasuke didn't waste any time scaling the wall, his speed amazing even to Naruto, who was forced to scramble to his feet and balance on the wall while Sasuke initiated his attacks once more. Residua, exhaustion and lack of a good breakfast were Naruto's downfall, causing him to lose his balance and stumble, landing thankfully on his rear. Do you realize he is going to be cursing like a sailor all day? Sasuke snarled angrily at Naruto, his katana pointed in a particular tender region. I should cut off your balls and feed them to the dogs. Geez, I'm sorry, I'm not exactly 100% here, Naruto mumbled. You're lucky I like you. Sasuke lowered his katana much to Naruto's relief. Not that he expected his friend to kill him, Naruto just didn't want to take any chances. Sasuke. He tended to be a live wire on any subject revolving around Itachi, particularly since Itachi's return. Does this mean I still get lunch? His mouth was already watering at the thought of Miko's cooking. Though he might try, a man could not live on ramen alone. I should let you starve. Sasuke jumped from the wall, landing gracefully amidst the flowers. The bastard was too pretty for his own good. It was a shame Sasuke didn't swing towards men, they would have made a good couple. Then again, there would be no Ryu and that boy was a light in Naruto's life. Come on, I said I was sorry. Then babysit the next time you and Miko want a night to yourselves. Naruto grinned, hopping from the wall to join Sasuke under the porch. Miko, angel that she was, had left 2 cool glasses of juice for them to sip before lunch. A tempting offer. Sasuke leaned against a beam, staring out into the garden. I take it you and Itachi talked. Sasuke hummed, his fingers stroking the rim of the glass. We talked. It felt strange. Strange in a good way or strange in an Itachi went completely insane after your battle. Naruto downed the drink in a single gulp. I think we were both insane before the battle began. Last night, it felt like we were brothers again. Not strangers or enemies. I felt like I was 5 again and he was carrying me around on his back. Those times on his back were the happiest of my life until I had Ryu. Sasuke frowned, obviously lost in his own world. Nay Sasuke, can I talk with him? There were some thoughts he wanted to share with Itachi. Now was as good a time as any in the event a death sentence was handed down. Not that Sasuke would allow such a thing and would likely take his family including Itachi and seek refuge in mountain country. Itachi. Who else, dumbass? Naruto stretched his arms high. There are some things I want to speak with him about. Sasuke shrugged. If he'll talk to you, I suppose. After lunch I'll take you to him. Tsunade has him on bed rest for a few days. She said his chakra will take as long to replenish. Naruto nodded, following Sasuke towards the dining area. There were curious things beating at him, things he had debated through for 7 years. Things only Itachi would have the answer for. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.